Chapter 1432. Bai Yuchen was really a good person. Chu Xiu could not bear to kill him. This time, other than Bai Yuchen stirring up trouble, Chu Xiu's biggest goal was to interfere with West Chu's destiny. That way, in the battle for destiny, he would be able to completely control the destiny of the three kingdoms. He did not expect the other party to give him a dragon soul and dragon core. Although the dragon soul was weak, it should be able to greatly increase the power of his primordial spirit after refining it. There was also the dragon core, which was an extinct existence. It could be described as a priceless treasure. After refining it, he might not even need Dugu Weiwei's blood essence to reach the peak of the sixth heavenly layer. Of course, from another perspective, this might also be one of the benefits of providence. If Chu Xiu did not make a big deal out of things, he would not have forced the mysterious heaven realm into a corner. If he did not force the mysterious heaven realm into a corner, perhaps Bai Yuchen would not have used the Azure Dragon, which he regarded as his trump card. Everything was preordained by the heavens. Only when Chu Xiu interfered did he vaguely sense the wonders of karmic luck. Chu Xiu looked at Bai Yuchen. Previously, Bai Yuchen had wanted to see remorse in Chu Xiu's eyes, but now, there was only remorse in his eyes. He did not think that it was a mistake for him to provoke three Pristine's palace and target Chu Xiu. For the Daoist sects, this was already the norm and a habit. Regardless of who won or lost, they would be able to earn some benefits every time. Everyone also tacitly controlled the extent of the conflict and controlled it within a certain range. Bai Yuchen only regretted that he did not understand Chu Xiu more carefully. Chu Xiu was simply a madman. He took a small matter and escalated it to the point of no limit. It was a fight to the death, and he did not test the waters at all. If he had known earlier, even if Bai Yuchen was prepared to become enemies with Chu Xiu, he would have been prepared to completely destroy Chu Xiu. He would not have been caught off guard by Chu Xiu. However, it was useless to regret now. The mysterious heaven realm must be destroyed today. Not only would Chu Xiu want to destroy it, but the entire martial arts world would not let the mysterious heaven realm go. Ever since they descended to the lower realms, all the resentment and anger accumulated in the martial artists in the lower realms were released at that moment. Although Chu Xiu was the fuse and the mastermind behind all of this, just as Chu Xiu had said to Bai Yuchen before, he was just a person who drew his sword. Things had already reached this point. If Chu Xiu pulled out the knife, it would be impossible to take it back. Just as Chu Xiu was about to kill Bai Yuchen and put an end to everything, he suddenly paused. He stood with his hands behind his back and looked at the sky. The two ox-nosed Taoist priests from the three Pristine's temples still wanted to play this trick. Both sides were almost done fighting, so they came out to stop them at the critical moment. Did they want to show off and pretend to be superior? Huo Gongbi and Zheng Tai were hidden in a cloud. Seeing that Chu Xiu did not continue to make a move, the two of them felt a little awkward. They were actually thinking the same thing that Chu Xiu had guessed. They were prepared to wait until Bai Yuchen's life was hanging by a thread before making a move. In fact, they had already arrived when Bai Yuchen was suppressed by Chu Xiu. However, they did not make a move at that time. That was because they suddenly realized that Bai Yuchen still had some tricks up his sleeves. Although they knew that the mysterious heaven realm would never be so obedient, they also wanted to see how much Bai Yuchen had been holding back. As a result, their faces darkened with what they saw. They sealed their power into the Emperor Xian Tian's Dharma form and pretended to be at the early stage of the eighth heaven even though they were at the peak of the eighth heaven. They had also kept the Azure Dragon soul from 10,000 years ago. It had even been nurtured to a complete level by now. It was obvious who these things were kept to deal with. They had guessed that the mysterious heaven realm would not be obedient, but they did not expect them to be so dishonest. That was why they deliberately did not make a move earlier. They were waiting for Chu Xiu to use up all the trump cards of the mysterious heaven realm. Then, they would appear as the savior and stop Chu Xiu. In exchange, the mysterious heaven realm would shed tears of gratitude and earn a reputation. However, Chu Xiu had seen through their plan. This showed that the Three Pure Palace was scheming. Huo Gongbi and Zheng Tai looked at each other. Since they had been exposed, there was no point in hiding anymore. The two of them had no choice but to show themselves. Everyone, please stop. Enough people have died today. Zheng Tai sighed. His voice instantly spread throughout the battlefield. Chu Xiu waved his hand and asked his subordinates to retreat for the time being. Of course, it did not matter whether they retreated or not. After a chaotic battle, the entire mysterious heaven realm had been destroyed. 2 of the 5 martial immortals had even died. However, the miraculous thing was that Feng Yu was still alive under Chen Qingdi's iron fist. His life force was quite tenacious. Chu Xiu looked at the 2 people in front of him and sneered. Enough people have died? If the 2 of you had come out a little later, they would have all died. That's why the 2 of you have appeared at the wrong time. Huo Gongbi frowned. Chu Xiu, you've won this time. It's impressive enough. The entire mysterious heaven realm has been destroyed by you. What else do you want? Give the Three Pure Palace some face and retreat with your people. The conflict between the upper and lower realms will be eliminated. From now on, everyone will be treated equally and we will develop the martial arts era together. Bullshit. Chu Xiu spat out these 2 words indifferently. Huo Gongbi seemed to be unable to believe his ears. He stared at Chu Xiu in a daze. What did you say? It wasn't that Huo Gongbi's ears weren't good, but he didn't expect someone of Chu Xiu's status and realm to speak such vulgar language. I said your bullsh** ting. Chu Xiu sneered. Your Three Pure Palace really thinks that everyone else is an idiot. Are you the only smart one? Things have already developed to this extent. The martial arts world of the lower realm and the mysterious heaven realm almost suffered heavy losses. Yet, you guys stood out to be the saviors? You guys have taken all the fame and benefits. How can there be such a good thing in this world? Then what else do you want? Huo Gongbi said coldly. I want there to be no mysterious heaven realm in this world. Impossible. Huo Gongbi stood out and said coldly, how can the Dao sect allow you to kill wantonly? Everyone knew that the mysterious heaven realm followed the lead of the Three Pure Palace. Although the mysterious heaven realm was a little dishonest, the Three Pure Palace had to protect the mysterious heaven realm on the surface. In fact, the current situation was the best outcome for the Three Pure Palace. Although they did not get the Dao scripture of the myriad Dao heavenly palace in Chu Xiu's hands, they had exposed the mysterious heaven realm's intentions in advance. In the end, they were crippled. Then, the Three Pure Palace would protect the mysterious heaven realm and even take it in. Everyone would be happy with the reputation and benefits. Unfortunately, Chu Xiu would not let them get what they wanted. Chu Xiu sneered and said coldly, the Dao sect does not allow wanton killing, but the martial arts world of the lower realm can be bullied wantonly? The leader of the northern region, the supreme leader of the Dao sect. The Three Pure Palace is more powerful and domineering than the mysterious heaven realm. The martial arts world of the lower realm may not be a match for the Three Pure Palace, but at this time, we do not hesitate to fight. Kill. As Chu Xiu shouted, the martial artists of the lower realm who had stopped before began to charge again. Under the leadership of Chu Xiu, they had already crippled the mysterious heaven realm. It could even be said that this group of people was now bloodshot. So what if the opponent was the Three Pure Palace? Kill together. Chu Xiu. How dare you? Huo Gongbi could not believe that Chu Xiu did not even give the Three Pure Palace the slightest face and dared to kill wantonly in front of him. Huo Gongbi took a step forward in anger, and the 2 Dao swords behind him were already unsheathed. The 2 Dao swords, one black and one white, one yin and one yang, flew straight out of his hands and seemed to have turned into 2 flood dragons, biting towards Chu Xiu. A look of interest appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. Huo Gongbi actually cultivated the Tao of Yin and Yang. In the next moment, the third eye between Chu Xiu's eyebrows opened, and the power of Yin and Yang turned into a divine light and roared out, completely suppressing the other party's Yin and Yang Tao swords. Huo Gongbi snorted coldly and formed a seal with his hands. The two Tao swords connected head to tail, and the Yin and Yang Qi did not generate each other. Instead, they turned into a power that countered each other. With a loud bang, the power of Yin and Yang in the surroundings shattered and fused, turning into boundless chaos that crushed towards Chu Xiu. Huo Gongbi was indeed a martial immortal from the Three Pure Palace. Although he rarely appeared in the pugilistic world, his understanding of the Tao far exceeded that of Bai Yuchen. Chu Xiu had the source of Yin and Yang, which was why he was able to completely comprehend the power of this Tao and use it to the extreme. However, Huo Gongbi had relied purely on himself to study the Tao of Yin and Yang, which was why he had reached such a realm. Of course, this also meant that Chu Xiu was closer to the power of the Yin and Yang origin of heaven and earth. Forming a seal with his hands, Chu Xiu clasped his palms together, and the power of Yin and Yang turned into a giant millstone of heaven and earth, crushing everything in its path. Although Chu Xiu had used the clear sky reflecting shadow just now, he had stopped halfway, so Chu Xiu still had a portion of his strength left. It was not a problem for him to continue using the mystique. Under the crushing of the millstone of heaven and earth, be it Yin or Yang or chaos, everything was immediately compressed and crushed. Huo Gongbi's expression suddenly changed, his face filled with disbelief. Chu Xiu was clearly from the demonic Tao. Even if his martial arts were Daoist, Buddhist, and demonic, how could he have comprehended the power of Yin and Yang of the Daoist lineage to such a degree, and even come up with a mystique of this level? Huo Gongbi's Daoist robe fluttered in the wind. He formed a seal with his hands, wanting to continue attacking. At the same time, Chu Xiu was prepared to use the furnace of good fortune to completely crush him. Facing such a peak 8th heaven martial immortal, the current Chu Xiu could only use his trump card and fight head-on. However, Zheng Tai could not sit still at this moment. Clouds and mist surged around him, and the wind and clouds surged. In an instant, he stood in front of the two and shouted, "Enough! Stop fighting!" Zheng Tai shouted at Huo Gongbi, "Calm down. Are you going to fight to the death with Chu Xiu? Are you going to drag the Three Pristine Temple into the fierce battle with the martial artists of the lower realm? Do you want to be like the mysterious heaven realm, completely opposing the martial arts world of the lower realm? Then what is the purpose of the Three Pristine Temple coming to the lower realm?" Zheng Tai's series of questions finally made Huo Gongbi calm down. The Three Pristine Temple did not come to the lower realm to be enemies with the martial arts world of the lower realm, nor did they come to invade the lower realm. They came for the orthodoxy, for the inheritance of their disciples. But now, Chu Xiu had tied the entire martial arts world of the lower realm to himself. How vicious was this move? Fighting against Chu Xiu to the end was the same as fighting against the martial arts world of the lower realm to the end. Chu Xiu should be punished for his evil intentions. Zheng Tai turned around, looked at Chu Xiu, and said in a deep voice, "Cult Master Chu, although I haven't had much contact with you, I know that to be able to reach your current position from a nobody, you are definitely not a lunatic. A lunatic can be strong for a moment, but not for a lifetime. You are in charge of the demon cult, and you are the famous demon lord of the lower realm. You should know the consequences of letting the Daoist and the lower realm fight to the death." Chu Xiu said with a faint smile, "Are you trying to kill me with flattery, Reverend? Actually, I am a lunatic. Sometimes, I think too much about the gains and losses will make me hesitate. Why not go crazy? Who cares about the flood after that? As for the battle to the death between the Daoist and the lower realm, let me put it bluntly, the Three Pristines Temple is a little too self-righteous. The Three Pristines Temple is indeed the strongest among the Daoist, but can you represent the entire Daoist? The Heavenly Luo Treasure Temple has just taken over the Sabodhi Monastery and the Great Light Temple. Are they willing to fight to the death with the martial arts world of the lower realm? The Star River Martial Arts Academy wants to compete for the karma of the lower realm, and has offered countless conditions to recruit disciples. Are they willing to fight to the death with the martial arts world of the lower realm? The Sanskrit sect has suffered heavy losses in the Daoist, and they still want to rely on the disciples of the lower realm to recover. Do you think they are willing to fight to the death with the martial arts world of the lower realm? Other than these large sects, there are countless small sects in the lower realm, as well as the descendants of ancient venerables. They have already established their sects in the lower realm and have taken root in the martial arts world of the lower realm. Do you think they are willing to fight to the death with the martial arts world of the lower realm? At this point, the Three Pristines Temple can only represent yourselves, not anyone. So please remove the prefix of the Daoist. Is the Three Pristines Temple going to intervene in this matter and fight to the death with the martial arts world of the lower realm? Chapter 1433. Zheng Tai and Hua Gongbi realized that they had fallen into a trap. Previously, Hua Gongbi had thought that if Mysterious Heaven Realm was destroyed, they would step forward to protect it and gain both fame and fortune. However, they had neglected one point, which was whether Chu Xiu was willing to give them face and let them protect Mysterious Heaven Realm. Chu Xiu was willing to give them face at the World Sword Sect because he was indeed weaker than Zheng Tai at that time. What else could he do if he didn't give them face? Furthermore, Chu Xiu's main target was the blood essence of Dugu Weiwei in the World Sword Sect. If he got it, he would have won half the battle. Now that the Taoist master was not here, Chu Xiu already had the strength to challenge a peak 8th heaven martial immortal. Moreover, he had also pulled in the entire martial world of the lower realm. In other words, he had the strength to not give the Three Pure Palace any face. Zheng Tai said in a deep voice, "Cult Master Chu, what do you want? This matter can be discussed, there's no need to go this far." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "I've said it before, I don't want Mysterious Heaven Realm to exist in this world anymore. Can you do it?" Zheng Tai and Hua Gongbi looked at each other. That was exactly what they could not do. If Chu Xiu destroyed Mysterious Heaven Realm in front of them, how would Three Pristine Palace be able to save their face? If they had known this would happen, they would not have shown up. At that moment, Bai Yuchen, who had been silent all this while and his life force was almost exhausted, suddenly laughed. His laughter was extremely sad and crazy. Zheng Tai frowned. He did not have a good impression of Bai Yuchen. If it wasn't for the fact that they were both from the Dao lineage and he had to protect the reputation of Three Pristine Palace, he would really want to see Mysterious Heaven Realm be destroyed. Bai Yuchen laughed bitterly. "I had always thought that I was a chess player. The entire myriad Tao Heavenly Palace would not be able to live to the great Luo Tian under the Three Pure Palaces' schemes and pressure, but I, the Mysterious Heaven Realm, became the second in the Dao sect. After plotting and enduring for so long, I finally realized that I was wrong. All the ancestors of Mysterious Heaven Realm were wrong. If I wanted to become the Supreme Dao sect, it was useless no matter how much I endured. Today, aren't I just a chess piece? The calamity that befell the profound Heaven Realm today was all because of my greed and ignorance. Chu Xiu, I'll give you an explanation if you want. Masters, our Mysterious Heaven Realm is now half crippled and will no longer have any disloyalty. From now on, the Mysterious Heaven Realm will merge with the Three Pristines Palace and will never betray us. I only hope that the two of you can leave one last trace of Mysterious Heaven Realm." After saying that, Bai Yuchen did not even give Zheng Tai and Hua Gongbi a chance to speak. He actually crushed his own heart meridian and died. Zheng Tai and Hua Gongbi simply had the urge to curse when they saw this scene. Bai Yuchen was basically forcing him to abdicate, using his life to force him to abdicate. Bai Yuchen's death had pushed them into a corner. If they couldn't protect the Mysterious Heaven Realm today, the reputation of the Three Pristine Temple would be severely damaged. For the three pure palace, which stood at the peak, reputation was a practical benefit to them. Chu Xiu did not expect Bai Yuchen to be so ruthless. Bai Yuchen was similar to the past sect masters of mysterious heaven realm. Although he was not weak, he was too calculative and petty. It was easy for him to plot against himself in the end. This time, he failed to plot against Chu Xiu and was forced into a dead end. Without Chu Xiu, the three pristine palace would teach them a lesson when the mysterious heaven realm accumulated enough strength and was ready to share the northern region with three pristine palace. Although the three pristine palace valued their reputation, they would not be soft-hearted at such a time. At the last step, Bai Yuchen actually became magnanimous and used his life to force the three pristine palace to protect the mysterious heaven realm. Zheng Tai let out a long sigh and turned to look at Chu Xiu. He said helplessly, "Cult Master Chu, you've seen it for yourself. The three pristine palace must protect the mysterious heaven realm. What conditions do you want? Just tell me. I believe that you made such a big fuss today because you definitely don't want to fight to the death with my three pristine's palace." The martial arts forces below also looked at Chu Xiu. They believed that Chu Xiu would give them a satisfactory answer. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Since the three pristine palace is sincere, I'm willing to take a step back. Although I was the one who provoked the incident in the mysterious heaven realm today, it was caused by the conflict between the Daoist and the lower realm. This conflict happened in the northern Yen, but I suppressed it. However, I can only protect the entire northern Yen, but not the entire martial arts world in the lower realm. In the past, when the Daoist came to the lower realm, they once said that you and I came from the same source, but in fact, some sects don't see it that way." Zheng Tai hurriedly said, "The three pristine palace has always seen it that way." Chu Xiu chuckled. Only the three pristine palace themselves knew whether or not they saw it that way. It doesn't matter whether the three pristine palace sees it that way or not. What's important is that we need to redefine the rules. These words were previously made by the Daoist, but to put it bluntly, the future of the martial arts world in the lower realm is built on the integrity of the Daoist forces. Wouldn't it be terrible if you don't want to keep this promise? As the top Daoist sect, the Three Pristine Palace hopes to announce to the world in the name of the Three Pristine Palace and the Kunlun Devil cult that the Daoist sects are prohibited from harassing and oppressing the martial arts world in the lower realm. If there are any violations, the two sects will join forces and kill them together. Huo Gongbi snorted coldly when he heard this, and his face was full of dissatisfaction. As Chu Xiu said, whether the verbal promise should be kept or not depended entirely on whether the Three Pristine Palace and other forces wanted to keep it. But at this time, when the official document was announced to the world, the Three Pristine Palace would lose their reputation if they broke their promise. Moreover, this document had to be signed by the Kunlun Devil cult and the Three Pristine Palace together. Didn't this mean that the Kunlun Devil cult was qualified to be on par with the Three Pristine Palace? However, it could only be like this now. The Three Pristine Palace was the top Daoist sect, but the strength of the Kunlun Devil cult was also the best in the martial arts world in the lower realm. Except for Chu Xiu's Kunlun Devil cult, no one in the martial arts world in the lower realm was qualified to sign this agreement. Zheng Tai said in a deep voice, "Okay, the Three Pristine Palace agrees." Anyway, the Three Pristine Palace had not planned to break their promise before. It was not a big deal to agree at this time, except for giving Chu Xiu a favor. The martial arts forces in the lower realm also breathed a sigh of relief. With the official promise of the Three Pristine Palace and the announcement to the world, they did not have to worry about offending a Daoist sect in the future and being destroyed. At least there were people above to restrain them. Chu Xiu said with a smile, "Since the Three Pristine Palace has agreed, it's time to talk about the second thing." As he spoke, Chu Xiu took out the Daoist scripture of the Myriad Dao Heavenly Palace and said, "The first thing is for the whole martial arts world in the lower realm, and the second thing is for me." Everyone obviously wants the Daoist scripture of the Myriad Dao Heavenly Palace. Why do you still refuse? This is my second deal. Do you still want to refuse? Huo Gongbi still wanted to say something, but this time, Zheng Tai interrupted him very strongly and said in a deep voice, "Okay, I agree to this deal. Then I will send someone to the Daoist 3 pristine palace to get the blood essence of the one from 500 years ago." Through this incident, Zheng Tai could see how ruthless Chu Xiu was. It was clearly a small matter of scheming against each other. The two sides could stand behind and be chess players. The mysterious heaven realm and the celestial master mansion could be chess pieces and let them fight at will. In the end, Chu Xiu didn't act as a chess piece or a player. Instead, he flipped the game violently. Everyone faced each other bare-chested. This was simply unreasonable. If the Three Pristines Palace refused again this time, he, Chu Xiu, might stir up some trouble. Anyway, the deal was a win-win situation. The Three Pristine Palace would not suffer too much. Chu Xiu laughed and said, "You're straightforward. There's one last thing. If you agree, I will immediately leave with my people." Huo Gongbi could not help but say angrily, "Chu Xiu. You can't do it again and again. Do you really think the Three Pristine Palace is easy to bully?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "This third thing is just to put an end to it. One of the culprits of this matter is Bai Yuchen's personal disciple, Feng Yu. Anyone in the entire mysterious heaven realm can be spared, but he must die." Everyone present immediately looked at Feng Yu, who had been seriously injured by Qinqing Di and was still vomiting blood. The people of the martial arts world and the mortal world wanted him dead. After all, he was the first one to bully the Vermilion Bird Pavilion. The mysterious heaven realm had been destroyed, and the remaining two martial immortals also wanted him dead because his stupid actions had given Chu Xiu an excuse. Although, with Chu Xiu's attitude, even without Feng Yu, Chu Xiu would still find other excuses to use against him, but who asked him to get himself in trouble? Even the other disciples of the mysterious heaven realm thought so. Humans are selfish. If you die, everyone else can live. So, please learn from your master and die obediently. Even Zheng Tai and Huo Gongbi thought so. This matter was already a mess, and the Three Pure Temple did not want to be entangled with Chu Xiu anymore. Therefore, the two of them looked at Feng Yu silently, hoping that he would be more responsible like Bai Yuchen and bear the karma himself in exchange for the survival of the entire mysterious heaven realm and the end of this matter. Under everyone's gaze, Feng Yu felt like he was about to break down. He was not Bai Yuchen, and he did not carry so many things on his back. Feng Yu had always compared himself to Su Guishan of the Three Pure Temple. He thought that if he was in the Three Pure Temple, he would be even more outstanding than Su Guishan. But now, everything was gone, and he still wanted to die. He did not want to die. With a furious roar, the black water around Feng Yu turned into a sea of blood. The power of his qi and blood burned violently, and he turned into a blood-colored rainbow, trying to escape. At this moment, Lu Jianghu sneered and took a step forward. As he formed a seal with his hand, he displayed the blood demon power to the extreme. The sea of blood around Feng Yu instantly flowed backward and enveloped his entire body, instantly exploding. With a soft bang, Feng Yu's corpse fell to the ground, turning into a dried corpse. Lu Jianghu laughed proudly and said, "You dare to play with qi and blood in front of me, Lu Jianghu, the Blood Sea Demon Venerable? How naive! This sovereign, retreat." Seeing that Feng Yu was dead, Chu Xiu waved his hand and interrupted Lu Jianghu's pretentious act. He immediately retreated with the lower realm martial artists. Lu Jianghu. Chapter 1434. The Three Pristines Temple was still very honest. After agreeing to Chu Xiu's request, they immediately took more than 150 drops of Dugu Weiwei's blood essence from the Daoist Three Pristines Temple and exchanged it with Chu Xiu for the Dao Cannon of the Myriad Dao Heavenly Palace. With these things, Chu Xiu did not return to the branch of the southern Kunlun devil cult, but went directly to the Kunlun mountain for seclusion. Previously, Chu Xiu was going to take this opportunity to step into the peak of the sixth heaven. But now, in addition to Dugu Weiwei's blood essence, Chu Xiu also got the dragon core and part of the dragon soul of the Tsang dragon. Therefore, Chu Xiu decided to return to the Kunlun mountain for seclusion and use the power of the rootless sacred fire to refine the dragon core. He wanted to see if he could directly step into the seventh heaven. With the current strength of Chu Xiu's subordinates, there was no need to worry about anything happening in the southern China branch. All the martial immortals of the Kunlun devil cult were gathered there. Moreover, although the matter of Chu Xiu stirring up the whole martial arts world in the lower realm was big, it also shocked the Daoist sects in one fell swoop, so that they did not dare to act recklessly again. They already had some understanding of Chu Xiu's style of doing things when they were in the Daoist, but this time they finally saw Chu Xiu's madness and his style of doing things that could not be understood by common sense. A madman was not scary. What was scary was that this madman had extremely strong strength and influence, which made people very afraid. Unless the experts of the ninth heaven such as the Tao Master returned to the lower realm, otherwise, for the time being, no one could deal with Chu Xiu. Therefore, taking advantage of this stable time, Chu Xiu had a long seclusion in the Kunlun devil cult. At the peak of Kunlun, beside the rootless sacred fire. This wasn't the first time Chu Xiu had refined Dugu Weiwei's blood essence. This time, it could be said that everything went smoothly. Every drop of Dugu Weiwei's blood essence fused into his body in exchange for an explosive increase in strength. More than 150 drops of blood essence directly pushed Chu Xiu's strength to the peak of the sixth heavenly layer, but he could no longer take another step forward. Chu Xiu gently shook his head. This situation was within his expectations. Although the power contained in Dugu Weiwei's blood essence was strong and could fuse with Chu Xiu's, it lacked some explosive power. Chu Xiu took out the dragon soul and dragon core. At this time, the Azure Dragon's soul was still struggling, but its soul was already extremely weak. No matter how it struggled, it couldn't escape from Chu Xiu's palm. He threw the dragon core into the rootless sacred fire. At the same time, Chu Xiu's 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet began to spin continuously, completely wearing down the will of the dragon soul. The rootless sacred fire had now been jointly set up by Master Yuan Ji and Chaoing into a large array, which could be used to refine weapons and elixirs. At the very least, its effect was no less than that of the array on the rootless sacred fire 500 years ago. Although the power of the dragon core was strong, it gradually melted under the smelting of the rootless sacred fire. At this time, the dragon soul was also gradually being worn down by the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet, and only the pure power of the primordial spirit was left. Chu Xiu waved his hands, and the power of the rules guided the dragon core and dragon soul into his body at the same time. At this moment, a powerful force entered his body, and even cracks appeared on Chu Xiu's extremely tough body. It made him roar into the sky, but what came out was a dragon's roar. The third eye in between Chu Xiu's eyebrows bloomed, and the power of yin and yang suppressed his body, and finally the cracks gradually healed. At the same time, the powerful power of the rules lingered around Chu Xiu's body. After an unknown amount of time, the power of the rules around Chu Xiu's body became more and more. From the perspective of others, the space within 10 feet of Chu Xiu seemed to be separated from the world. Earth, wind, water, fire, all kinds of powers coiled around him. Finally, with a loud bang, they all exploded, and a pillar of light shot up into the sky. The entire Kunlun mountain range welcomed a huge avalanche. However, there weren't many disciples on Kunlun mountain to begin with, and there wasn't anyone in the outer regions either. So, Chu Xiu was able to unleash his power at will. There were 9 levels of martial immortal. In Chu Xiu's opinion, the first 3, the middle 3, and the last 3 were the 3 thresholds. Now that Chu Xiu had stepped into the 7th level, he could be said to have entered the final threshold of the martial immortal realm. Every increase in heaven would bring an enormous difference in the foundation of power. Of course, this also meant that if Chu Xiu wanted to step into the 8th level, he would either have to be like the other martial immortals, and train in seclusion for years or even decades, or he would have to find more spiritual items and treasures, and rely on external power to make a breakthrough. Unfortunately, such items were extremely difficult to find. Chu Xiu had already dug out most of the foundations of the heavenly souls. After stepping out of the Kunlun mountain range, the entire Kunlun mountain range was extremely quiet. There were very few disciples left here. Practically all of them were in seclusion. Even though they heard the commotion caused by Chu Xiu, they didn't dare to come and check it out. In the past, whenever Chu Xiu made a breakthrough, there would always be people like Lu Jianghu or Mei Qinglian guarding him. When they saw Chu Xiu making a breakthrough, they would congratulate him. Now that he had made a breakthrough, Chu Xiu actually felt a bit uncomfortable without their congratulatory voices. Of course, Chu Xiu was not a vain person. Seeing that there was no one around, Chu Xiu stepped into the air and arrived before the entrance to the Kunlun devil cult. There were 2 disciples guarding the entrance. Cult Master. When they saw Chu Xiu descend from the air, the 2 disciples guarding the entrance were so shocked that they couldn't even speak. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "How long have I been in seclusion?" When he was refining Dugu Weiwei's essence and blood, Chu Xiu was still conscious. It only took him less than a month to completely refine it. However, when he was refining the dragon core and dragon soul, Chu Xiu's attention was focused on absorbing and refining power. In addition, Kunlun Mountain was covered in snow all year round, so he really didn't notice the passage of time. The disciple of the Kunlun devil cult who was guarding the entrance immediately said, 7 months, 9 days, and 8 hours. Chu Xiu looked at the disciple in surprise. There were many talents in the Kunlun devil cult, but this person actually remembered the time clearly. Chu Xiu patted the disciple's shoulder and said, "Not bad. Next time when we change guards, get an extra set of pills." "Thank you, cult master." The disciple was immediately excited. After Chu Xiu left, the disciple patted his chest and breathed a sigh of relief, with a lingering fear in his heart. Another disciple was surprised and said, "What's wrong with you? Cult master has just rewarded you, why are you still like this? I seem to have calculated the time wrongly." "Then why did you answer so quickly? Why are you hesitating when the cult master is asking a question? Besides, if the cult master knew, would he still need to ask us?" Although the time was wrong, the time of 7 months was correct. Chu Xiu didn't expect that he would be in seclusion for such a long time. After returning to the Nanman Branch Palace, the few who had reached Martial Immortal, except for Lu Jianghu, were all in seclusion. Lu Jianghu didn't want to preside over the overall situation in the Nanman Branch Palace. He had been locked up for 500 years, and he seemed to have a fear of seclusion. He would rather rely on killing external forces and other methods to advance than honestly going into seclusion. Therefore, Chu Xiu had to call Lu Jianghu and asked, "Has there been any disturbance in the Jianghu recently?" Lu Jianghu scratched his head and thought for a moment before saying, "I really didn't pay attention." "Cult master, wait for a moment, I'll find someone to ask." With that, Lu Jianghu immediately asked someone to find Master Yuan Ji, who was still building the formation, and asked him to tell him what had happened during this period of time. Chu Xiu said with a speechless face, "Others are in seclusion, but you are idle. In the end, you still don't know anything?" Lu Jianghu hurriedly said, "I haven't been idle. I have been training my subordinates during this period of time. Those disciples are the foundation of our holy church. We have to nurture them well." Master Yuan Ji said cautiously, "In the past few months, the Jianghu has been peaceful. Only some small things have happened. The mysterious heaven territory has been integrated into the 3 Pure Temple. It was announced that the mysterious heaven territory took the initiative. Also, Su Yun and Rama both advanced to martial immortal and became the core disciples of the Heavenly Net Temple. The Great Light Temple has been changed to the Great Light Pavilion, with Su Yun as the head. The Subodhi Monastery has been changed to the Subodhi Courtyard, with Rama as the head. 4 months ago, the Xinghe Martial Academy had a conflict with the Jixia Martial Academy in recruiting disciples. Lord Qingqingdi came forward to suppress it, and Old Wei found the true martial church to mediate. Both sides took a step back. However, the existence of the Jixia Martial Academy has a direct conflict with the Xinghe Martial Academy. Because of the previous reputation and the Holy Church's participation, it has seriously affected the Xinghe Martial Academy's recruitment plan. There might be conflicts in the future. Chu Xiu nodded in understanding. Most of the things were within his expectations. It was relatively peaceful during this period of time. As for the conflict between the Xinghe Martial Academy and the Jixia Martial Academy, he had already thought about it when Chu Xiu interfered with Eastern Qi's providence. It couldn't be helped. Eastern Qi's providence didn't belong to him alone. If the Kunlun devil cult interfered, it would definitely lead to such an outcome. However, Meng Xinghe wasn't around, and Fang Daochen didn't dare to blow things up. Taking a step back was the best solution. Chu Xiu could be a little more arrogant now. Even if things got out of hand, the one who should be worried was Fang Daochen and not him. Chu Xiu said to Master Yuanji, "Help me find the two from the wind-sweeping pavilion and Xikong Tan from the divine machine gate." "Lu Jiang," he said in surprise, "why are you looking for these two?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Let them help me find something." With Chu Xiu's current strength, if he wanted to improve his cultivation quickly, he could only think of the yin and yang origins. Among the demonic Dao origins, Chu Xiu controlled the demonic Dao origins of the mortal world. His life soul controlled the netherworld heaven and the Daoist heaven. Among the yang extreme origins, Chu Xiu controlled the yang extreme origins of the mortal world. The Daoist origin was in Sanskrit, and the mortal world was nowhere to be found. Chu Xiu didn't know if there was the yang extreme origins in a place like the netherworld heaven. Even if there was, it was already controlled by his life soul. Therefore, the unknown origins were only the demonic Dao origins of the mortal world and the yang extreme origins of the mortal world. The power that could be unleashed by collecting a single origin power was extremely shocking. When two origin powers were combined, it became the yin and yang origins that were connected from head to tail. The power was even more shocking. Especially now that Chu Xiu had a third eye, it was different from when he had just obtained the origin and could only passively bear the power. At this time, if he had the yin and yang origins, Chu Xiu was confident that he could obtain more power. Chapter 1435. When Xikong Tan and Fang Fifan were summoned by Chu Xiu, they were still a little apprehensive. Based on their understanding of Chu Xiu, as long as Chu Xiu was looking for them, something big must have happened. However, when the two met, they sized each other up and narrowed their eyes at the same time. This was the aura of someone in the same trade. Although the divine machine gate was not a normal anemophilia, what they did in the Daoist was the same as anemophilia. Therefore, when the two met, with their ability to observe body language, they immediately discovered each other's identity. At this moment, the two forgot their apprehension, and the atmosphere became somewhat hostile. People in the same trade were enemies. Chu Xiu coughed softly, and the two who were at odds with each other immediately looked at Chu Xiu and said in unison, "We obey Cult Master Chu's decree. You don't have to be so serious. I didn't ask you to come for anything big." With that, Chu Xiu told them about the origin. "Xikong Tan, you've investigated the origin and found that it's in the Sanskrit sect, so you should have some experience. Therefore, this time, I'm asking you to find the other two origins. They might be in the lower realm, since the upper and lower realms have already merged. There should be some records in the lower realm, and the Daoist should also have some clues. This time, I need the two of you to work together and help me find clues about the origin. Once it's done, I have elixirs refined by the Earth Serpent and personal guidance from martial immortal experts. I'll strive to help you step into the martial immortal realm. Xikong Tan and Fang Fifan were both not very talented. Of course, this was in comparison to the Daoist's geniuses and martial immortal experts. Therefore, the chances of them becoming martial immortals in this lifetime could be said to be very small. At this moment, Chu Xiu's promise made them all a little tempted. Don't worry, Cult Master. I will do my best to complete this task for you. Xikong Tan said quickly. He was already on Chu Xiu's side. Although not openly, it was not a problem for him to call himself a subordinate. Although Wind Sweeping Tower had a lot of cooperation with the Kunlun Devil cult, they had not officially merged into the Kunlun Devil cult. Fang Fifan was also struggling with this problem. Therefore, Fang Fifan had no choice but to say, Wind Sweeping Tower is the same. After sending the two of them away, Chu Xiu did not enter seclusion. Instead, he prepared to train the Kunlun Demon sect disciples. Lu Jianghu's words reminded him that it had been a long time since he had bothered about these disciples of the Kunlun Demon sect. To be honest, he was not qualified to be the cult master. On the Kunlun Devil cult side, Mei Qinglian, Elder Wei, and Chu Wuji were in charge of these messy affairs. Chu Xiu basically just shrugged it off. The middle level of the Kunlun Devil cult was basically made up of Tangya, Yan Bugui, and other martial artists who had followed Chu Xiu since he was young. They had all kinds of means and strength, so there was no need for him to worry too much. There was no one in Jianghu who could be a hands-off boss to such an extent as Chu Xiu. Therefore, in the following period of time, the disciples cultivating in the Nanman Branch Palace were considered lucky to be able to listen to the cult master personally preach. What Chu Xiu preached was not simply the way of cultivation, but the way of fighting and killing. The way of martial arts depended on talent, luck, and opportunity. Everyone's understanding was different. They had the guidance of the elders of the Kunlun Devil cult. So in short, Chu Xiu was here to teach them how to kill. After 3 months, Xikong Tan and Fang Fifan had already received news, which even surprised Chu Xiu. Although no one had investigated the source before, it had been tens of thousands of years. This information would only be sealed in some old historical materials in some sects. It was normal for them to spend a year and a half without finding any clues, but he did not expect to get results so soon. After calling the two over, Chu Xiu asked, "Have you found the existence of the source?" The two looked at each other before Xikong Tan shook his head and said, "Reporting to Religion Master, Tower Master Fang and I worked together to search through the ancient books left in the lower realm before the great calamity of ancient times. At the same time, we returned to the Daoist continent and went to High Heaven Sect and Imperial Sky Pavilion to find a lot of ancient books. Finally, we found a clue to the source. But it was just a clue, and we couldn't investigate it." "Why?" Xikong Tan said cautiously, "Because the other party might not cooperate with our investigation." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "You mean the clue is in the hands of other forces?" Xikong Tan shook his head and said, "Not in the hands of other forces, but in the hands of someone else. That person is the Supreme Heavenly Demon who is currently in Heavenly Demon Palace. It was recorded in those ancient books that the Supreme Heavenly Demon had once searched for the demon path source that belonged to the upper realm. But something seemed to have gone wrong, causing him to fail to obtain the source. Then, he was besieged and sealed by the masters of the entire Jianghu at that time." Chu Xiu nodded in understanding. It turned out to be the Supreme Heavenly Demon. If the clue was in his hands, it was still possible. Regardless of his current strength, in the era of more than 10,000 years ago, the Supreme Heavenly Demon was indeed the #1 person in the demon path. He was the only one qualified to get his hands on the demon path source. "You've done well. As for the remaining Yang origin source, you guys investigate it carefully." Leave this matter to me. After giving them instructions, Chu Xiu went directly to Heavenly Demon Palace. The Supreme Heavenly Demon stayed very comfortably in Heavenly Demon Palace. He was only in the body of a primordial spirit. Even if he absorbed the qi and blood of other warriors, it was actually the body of a primordial spirit that was restored. Therefore, the Supreme Heavenly Demon had always been researching how to find his own body and return to his peak. Although he could casually take over a body, it would be difficult if he wanted to separate it. Therefore, he had his eyes on the bodies of Chu Xiu and Yi Xiaonan back then. In the end, he was beaten up by the two of them. Although he suffered a setback, he really couldn't find a suitable body for the time being. Fortunately, Heavenly Demon Palace had a favor to ask of him. Therefore, he agreed to all of the Supreme Heavenly Demon's requests. Yuan Kongqing followed beside the Supreme Heavenly Demon and asked carefully, "Senior, can you help my Heavenly Demon Palace's Palace Master get rid of his current state? If you can get rid of the Palace Master's current state and let him leave Heavenly Demon Palace, the power of our Heavenly Demon Palace will definitely skyrocket. We will also be able to help Senior take out more things." The Supreme Heavenly Demon snorted coldly and said, "What's the hurry? Can I go back on what I promised you? However, that Palace Master of yours is really creative. He actually connected his own body with the earth vein. Do you know what an earth vein is? It's a branch of the dragon vein. Now that this deity doesn't have a body, there's no good way to solve this problem. If we forcefully split it, does he have the guts to abandon his own body? When this deity recovers to his peak state, he can directly tear that earth vein apart and naturally release your Palace Master." Yuan Kongqing also didn't know whether what the Supreme Heavenly Demon said was true or false. At this moment, a disciple suddenly came to report that Chu Xiu had come to visit. The Supreme Heavenly Demon's primordial spirit body emitted a black gas and asked doubtfully, "Who is Chu Xiu? Why does this name sound so familiar?" Yuan Kongqing said carefully, "Chu Xiu is the first person to defeat you previously." Yuan Kongqing felt that his words were already very tactful. He only said defeated and not hung up and beaten. However, the Supreme Heavenly Demon was still angered to the point that his hair stood on end. The black gas around his body revolved rapidly. "Damn it! That kid actually dares to come to me, what is he trying to do?" Before Yuan Kongqing could say anything, Chu Xiu had already entered the hall. "What? I just want to ask you something." If it was Yuan Kongqing who had the information, he might have been more polite on account of their relationship as allies. But against this Supreme Heavenly Demon, there was really no need to be polite. The Supreme Heavenly Demon glared at Chu Xiu and said coldly, "Kid, do you really think this deity is easy to bully? How dare you come and provoke this deity?" Chu Xiu couldn't be bothered to waste time with him and said lightly, "I ask, you answer. Don't you understand? Kid, you're courting death." Yuan Kongqing hurriedly said, "Cult Master Chu, wait. Let's talk this out." As soon as he said that, the third eye on Chu Xiu's forehead had already bloomed. In an instant, the power of yin and yang turned into a pillar of light that shot into the sky and pierced through the Supreme Heavenly Demon's entire body. Although he was only in the form of a Yuanshen, his Yuanshen was still crushed by the power of yin and yang, causing a part of it to crumble. This made him extremely shocked. Although he was beaten up by Chu Xiu the last time, he could at least fight back, unlike now where he couldn't even take a single hit from the opponent. Before the Supreme Heavenly Demon's Yuanshen could start to condense, the power of yin and yang in Chu Xiu's third eye had already flourished and turned into a circle of light. The power of yin and yang connected from head to tail, completely trapping the Supreme Heavenly Demon within. At the same time, Chu Xiu formed the Lotus Cross seal and smashed it directly onto the Supreme Heavenly Demon's body. Suddenly, a burst of black gas erupted and the Supreme Heavenly Demon's Yuanshen let out a scream as a part of it crumbled. "Speak or not." Bang! "Speak or not." Bang! With every question, Chu Xiu would land a cross-shaped lotus seal, causing the supreme heavenly demon to let out a miserable cry. After a few times, the other party's primordial spirit had already been weakened to the extent where it had just been released. Yuan Kongqing did not dare to stop him at all. He had heard about the incident at the Three Pristines Temple, which made Yuan Kongqing rejoice that he had not yet become enemies with Chu Xiu and that they could even be considered half an ally. At this time, even if the Heavenly Demon Palace needed the Supreme Heavenly Demon, he could only watch from the side if Chu Xiu wanted to make a move. Not to mention stopping him, he only hoped that the Heavenly Demon Palace would not be dragged into this. Seeing that Chu Xiu was about to land another Lotus Cross seal, the Supreme Heavenly Demon roared like he was on the verge of collapse. "I don't even know what you want. What do you want me to say?" "You want me to say, why don't you ask?" Chapter 1436. Supreme Heavenly Demon's technique was indeed strange, it could even be said to be mystical. At the very least, Chu Xiu had only seen two people who could truly preserve their primordial spirit. One was Dugu Weiwei and the other was this Supreme Heavenly Demon. However, this guy's indestructibility was only for defense. His primordial spirit could be weakened to the extreme, unlike Dugu Weiwei who could instantly seize another body after his physical body was destroyed. Therefore, although Supreme Heavenly Demon wasn't afraid of Chu Xiu killing him, he was afraid that Chu Xiu would weaken his primordial spirit and throw it into a random corner. He had already been sealed for more than 10,000 years. He didn't want to experience the feeling of being muddle-headed and unaware of the passage of time. Therefore, this great demon who had once dominated the world and stirred up waves and waves in the past was now afraid, very humiliatingly admitting defeat. The last cross-shaped lotus seal landed on the unparalleled heavenly demon's body. Buddhist light burst forth, causing him to let out another blood-curdling scream. Supreme Heavenly Demon roared, "I was already prepared to tell you, why are you still hitting me?" Chu Xiu shrugged and said, "I'm sorry. If I retract my divine power halfway after using it, the backlash would be too great. It's not like you'll die if I hit you, so what are you so excited about?" Supreme Heavenly Demon was already enraged by black fog and he almost couldn't maintain his form. However, he didn't want to be sealed, so he gritted his teeth and said, "What do you want to ask me?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "I've heard of the matter regarding the demonic Dao source. 10,000 years ago, you seem to have dabbled in the demonic Dao source. Do you know where the demonic Dao source is now?" Supreme Heavenly Demon was surprised, "What do you want it for?" "The existence of the source isn't something you can touch. Even the past Supreme Heavenly Demon couldn't refine it completely. I'm asking you where the source is, why are you talking so much nonsense?" Seeing that Chu Xiu was about to form the cross-shaped lotus seal again, Beyond Sky Demon immediately said, "The High Mortal Heaven's Devil Dao source is in the primitive Devil Cave. In the past, I tried to snatch it away but failed. It was impossible to refine the source of the Devil Dao. Since the appearance of the primordial Devil Cave in the High Mortal Heavens, it contained the souls of all the experts of the Devil Dao. They had died there, but they had been affected by the environment of primitive Demon Cave and the source of the demonic path, turning into demonic puppets that were extremely difficult to deal with. Of course, I wasn't afraid of them in the past, but even if I defeated them, I wouldn't be able to take away the demonic essence. Do you know where High Mortal Heaven's primitive Devil Cave is?" If the origin source of the Devil Dao was in the primitive Devil Cave, it would be reasonable. Chu Xiu's Devil Path origin that had descended to the mortal world was something he had brought with him from the primitive Demon Cave. "Find a map," Beyond Heavenly Demon said. Hearing this, Yuan Kongqing immediately got someone to find a map of the lower realm. Beyond Heavenly Demon searched for a long time on the map of the lower realm. Finally, he pointed to a location and said, "After the High Mortal Heavens and the Lower Mortal Heavens overlapped, if the space of primitive Devil Cave didn't shift, it should be here. There can only be one primitive Devil Cave in a world. The primitive Devil Cave in the Lower Mortal Heavens should still be open, but the primitive devil cave in the upper mortal heavens should have been sealed long ago. So, logically speaking, there shouldn't be any shift. With your current strength, as long as you find it, you should be able to forcefully open the primitive devil cave. Anyway, it's here, take your time to find it. Chu Xiu frowned slightly. Because the area that Beyond Heavenly Demon pointed to was actually the Western Desert. Although that place was small on the map, it was actually very big. Moreover, it was a large desolate land. This was a bit troublesome. After getting the information, Chu Xiu didn't continue to make things difficult for Soundless Heavenly Demon, and directly left. When Chu Xiu had completely left, Beyond Heavenly Demon coldly snorted, "Junior. Today's shame, this venerable will return it double in the future. 30 years in the east, 30 years in the west. When this venerable recovers his peak strength, he will change the color of the world." Yuan Tianfang, who was at the side, looked at Beyond Heavenly Demon, who only dared to speak ruthlessly after Soundless Heavenly Demon left. Now, he had some doubts about whether it was the right choice to let Beyond Heavenly Demon out. After returning to the South Barbarian land, Chu Xiu woke up Old Wei, Lu Fengxian, and Mei Qinglian from their seclusion, and prepared to take them and Lu Jianghu to the Western Desert. These people all cultivated demonic techniques. This time, when they entered the primitive devil cave, with Chu Xiu's current strength, he could guarantee their safety. Therefore, they, who also cultivated the demonic path, could also obtain a lot of benefits. Just as Chu Xiu had set off, Monk Longtu, who couldn't return to the Yellow Springs Heaven and hadn't appeared in Jianghu, took the initiative to go to the Sanskrit sect with his original spirit. In the previous battle in the original God Palace, the original spirit was seriously injured by Chu Xiu's clear sky reflecting shadow. After that, he completely hid and recuperated, and only recovered his strength now. Following behind Monk Longtu, the original spirit said, "Last time, you said that you had the confidence to deal with the person who took away my third objective, but in the end, your companions were killed by him, and only you escaped in a sorry state. Where is your so-called powerful master now? I suspect that you are lying to me." The original spirit's voice seemed very calm, without any fluctuations, but at this time, there was a hint of suspicion. Monk Longtu said a little awkwardly, "This time was an accident. You can doubt me, but you must never doubt my master. Don't worry, when he comes to this world, he will definitely make you a truly perfect creature. This time, as long as you listen to me, join the Sanskrit sect, and join hands with the Sanskrit sect to deal with Chu Xiu, and make a great contribution, my master will definitely not mistreat you in the future." The original spirit said reluctantly, "Are we still going to be enemies with that person? He was a man-made creature, but in reality, from the day he was given intelligence, he was no different from a human. He had all 7 emotions and 6 desires, so naturally, he would also have a heart of fear." It had to be said that Chu Xiu's blade had really frightened him. That was the most terrifying blade he had seen ever since he gained intelligence. Monk Longtu advised, "Don't worry. Last time, you had just broken the seal, so you weren't at your peak. Also, at that time, you were the only one facing Chu Xiu. This time, as long as you join the Sanskrit sect, we will join hands with them. With an 8th heaven martial immortal helping, there will definitely be no problem." As he tricked the original spirit, Monk Longtu handed over the visiting card and stepped into the Sanskrit sect's hall. Renaja and Yenma frowned as they looked at the 2 people in front of them, a little uncertain. The 2 of them were equivalent to 5th or 6th heaven martial immortals. They were experts no matter where they were. Of course, one of them might not look like a human, but his strength was there for all to see. Such a person kept saying that he wanted to join the Sanskrit sect and join hands with them. Furthermore, his origins were unknown. No matter what, Renaja didn't dare to believe him. "Could it be that the 2 of you are here to make fun of my Sanskrit sect? Tell me, who exactly are you? If you don't give me an answer today, I'm afraid you won't be able to leave the Sanskrit sect so easily." Monk Longtu smiled. Hall Master Renaja, don't be anxious. Actually, you don't have to worry about our identities. We have a common enemy, so we are natural allies. Common enemy? Who are you talking about? You were chased out by the Zen sect? Although Renaja felt that the aura of the person in front of him was a little strange, he could tell that the person was from the Zen sect. Monk Longtu shook his head. It has nothing to do with the Zen sect. I am no longer a Buddhist. Monk Longtu said, good. Since that is the case, I will ask the Sanskrit sect and the original god to head to the Heaven Devil Palace and force Chu Xiu to tell me his destination. I will find another group of people. Who? The World Sword Sect. Chapter 1437. The sword sect of the world was well behaved after descending. To put it more accurately, the sword sect of the world was terrified. Swordsmen would rather break than bend, but they were also afraid of death. During the battle in the southern Daoist region, the sword sect of the world was on the brink of death. If not for Zhengtai from the Three Pure Temple, there might not have been a sword sect of the world anymore. Therefore, after they descended to the lower realm, the sword sect of the world found a very remote place in the 100,000 mountains of West Chu to set up their sect. They didn't advertise it wantonly like the other sections. Instead, they kept a low profile and recruited disciples. Therefore, when Monk Longtu came to find him, Mu Baishuang rejected him decisively. Monk Longtu smiled. Sect leader Mu, don't reject me so decisively. I told you that even the Sanskrit sect will help. What are you worried about? It's not like the Sanskrit sect has never suffered at the hands of Chu Xiu, Mu Baishuang said expressionlessly. Monk Longtu shook his head. Times are different now. We have set up so much. If Chu Xiu still manages to turn the tables, then he is the chosen one. I am here with sincerity. Everyone from the sword sect of the world should have heard of the sword desolate domain, right? Mu Baishuang's expression changed when he heard that. Of course he knew about the sword desolate domain. It could be said to be the holy land of the sword Dao since ancient times. To be more precise, it was the beginning of ancient times. At that time, there was no sword sect of the world and there weren't even sects that specialized in the sword. Most people cultivated the sword Dao in their own sections. In reality, their initial martial Dao wasn't the sword Dao. Those people could be said to be the ancestors of the sword Dao. The sword desolate domain was the place where all the sword Dao experts in the world fought and studied the sword Dao. However, something went wrong and the small world where the sword desolate domain was collapsed. The entire sword desolate domain was destroyed and countless treasures and sword techniques were lost. In ancient times, the sword sect of the world searched but they couldn't find it. Did this monk know about the sword desolate domain? Do you know where the sword desolate domain is? Monk Longtu shook his head. Of course not. No one can be sure if that place still exists or if it was completely destroyed. However, I know the whereabouts of a broken sword that was passed down from the sword despair domain. That broken sword had accumulated sword chi for God knows how many thousands of years and I'm not a sword cultivator so I can't pick up that sword but Sovereign Mu can. As long as you agree to help me deal with Chu Xiu, I'll bring you to get that sword. After that, this sword will belong to your sword sect. Mu Baishuang remained silent for a while before finally nodding in agreement. It was unknown whether it was his hatred for Chu Xiu or the temptation of the sword that drove him to agree. When Monk Longtu went to the World Sword Sect to recruit people, the people from the Brahma sect also came to the Sky Demon Palace, which gave Yuan Kongqing a shock. The Heavenly Demon Palace had nothing to do with the Sanskrit sect, so why would the Sanskrit sect suddenly come to the Heavenly Demon Palace? Was it because he had cooperated with Chu Xiu that the Brahmin sect had come to settle the score? Without waiting for Yuan Kongqing to ask, Renaja said in a deep voice, "Where is the Supreme Heavenly Demon? Where did this junior come from? What business do you have with me?" A black fog swirled around and the supreme heavenly demon's primordial spirit body reappeared in the main hall. Previously, Chu Xiu's cross-lotus seal had destroyed a lot of his primordial spirit power, so he had been cultivating in the Sky Demon Palace during this period of time, trying to recover his strength. Of course, Yuan Kongqing wouldn't agree to use the lives of the Sky Demon Palace's martial artists to help the other recover his strength. However, everyone gave a little blood to the other party for the other party to slowly refine. Previously, Chu Xiu came to find you to ask about the primitive devil cave. Where did you point them to in the end? Tell me quickly. The supreme heavenly demon had just been beaten up by Chu Xiu and was still in an extremely sullen state. At this moment, Renaja's words carried a hint of interrogative meaning, which instantly made the supreme heavenly demon furious. How dare you? Who gave you the guts to speak to me like this? Even the ancestors of your Sanskrit religion had to be docile in front of me. Yuan Kongqing's expression changed. He seemed to have forgotten to tell the supreme heavenly demon that he couldn't afford to offend Chu Xiu, but he definitely couldn't afford to offend this person. You don't know how to appreciate favors. Renaja snorted coldly and formed a seal with his hands. A blurry four-armed Dharma appeared behind him. The four arms contained heaven and earth, as if it was a separate world, trapping the supreme heavenly demon within. A golden lotus bloomed in that world, exploding with dazzling Buddhist light. In an instant, the black fog and demonic qi around the supreme heavenly demon were completely purified. It was said that the Brahma god was born from a golden lotus. In the Sanskrit religion, the Shiva temple represented death and destruction, while the Vishnu temple represented creation and balance. The power of the Brahma god represented life and purification. Although its attribute was the complete opposite of the power of the Shiva temple, it was still incomparably domineering. Immediately, the supreme heavenly demon let out a blood-curdling scream, and the primordial spirit that had just recovered was immediately heavily injured again. I'll tell you. Chu Xiu has gone to the western desert. I don't know the exact location. Chu Xiu also needs to search the western desert to determine the location of primitive devil lair. Renaja snorted lightly. Why didn't you say so earlier? What a waste of time. After saying that, Renaja left leisurely. At this time, the supreme heavenly demon was already on the verge of death. Supporting his extremely weak primordial spirit, he forced himself to say angrily, when a tiger falls to the plains, he'll be bullied by dogs. These damn juniors. Sooner or later, they'll pay the price. This time, Yuan Kongqing didn't say anything. Instead, he ordered someone to take out a pen and paper, then wrote a bunch of names on it and handed it to the supreme heavenly demon. What's this? These are all people Senior can't afford to offend. Next time you meet them, you'd better be more polite. Western Desert Sword King City. This time, when Chu Xiu arrived at Sword King City, he discovered that Fang Qishao had already taken over the position of Sword King City's sect leader. This news didn't cause much of a stir in the pugilistic world. But when he saw Chu Xiu, Fang Qishao immediately started complaining. Brother Chu, you don't know this, but being a sect leader is not something a human should do. Today, there's trouble here, and tomorrow, there will be trouble there. No matter what you do, you have to prioritize Sword King City. Even I'm envious of your battles in the Central Plains warriors. Even if I don't participate, I can just watch from the sidelines. But in the end, all I can do is count the sand and listen to Anemophilia's stories. Behind him, Heavenly King Shen's face darkened. He snorted coldly. Not something a human should do. So I've been the sect leader of Sword King City for so many years, and now I'm not even human? Although Heavenly King Shen had already abdicated, and Fang Qishao was stronger than Heavenly King Shen, Heavenly King Shen still shrunk his neck when he heard this. Heavenly King Shen cupped his fists at Chu Xiu. I wonder what cult master Chu's orders are for you in Sword King City this time. Chu Xiu said, I want to find a place in Western Desert. I have some clues here. The primitive devil's cave in upper mortal heaven is in Western Desert. But I only know that it's in Western Desert. I don't know the exact location, so I need a lot of manpower to find it. Sword King City is the only power in Western Desert, so I can only ask for Brother Fang's help. Fang Qi Shao waved his hand. Don't worry, leave this matter to me. Brother Chu, tell me all the possible anomalies that the primitive devil's cave might show. After Chu Xiu finished, Fang Qi Shao found his disciples and had them translate the anomalies into the local languages of the foreign tribes. Then, he distributed the information to them one by one. The Western Desert was indeed sparsely populated. But no matter how sparsely populated it was, there were still some small countries and tribes in the western region. Sword King City could be said to be the sole ruler of the entire Western Desert. They were the best at this kind of thing. It was only at times like this that Fang Qi Shao acted like a sect leader. Sword King City went to find out more about the primitive devil's cave, while Chu Xiu stayed in Sword King City with his people. Since they had nothing to do, they decided to stay and talk about martial arts. The disciples of Sword King City could also listen. Although Wei Shuya was the only one among them who was proficient in swordsmanship, a martial immortal's explanation of martial arts was beneficial even if they only understood a few sentences. Sword King City was very fast. Or it could be said that Sword King City's control over the entire Western Desert was astonishing. When the news spread, all the small countries and tribes in the western region put aside their conflicts to look for clues for Sword King City. In just over 3 months, there was news. Just as Chu Xiu and the others were about to set off, Fang Qi Shao looked at Heavenly King Shen cautiously. Can I go with Brother Chu and the others? Heavenly King Shen said unhappily, you're the sect leader now. If you want to go, who can stop you? Fang Qi Shao's eyes lit up when he heard that. He quickly pulled Chu Xiu and the others away as if he was afraid that Heavenly King Shen would go back on his word. It was a small tribe that had found clues about the primordial demon cave. The tribe leader personally led Chu Xiu and the others to a desolate land at the border of the Western Desert. The tribe leader pointed in one direction and said in stiff Central Plains Chinese, wielder of the sword of the extreme west, distinguished guests, this place is very similar to the place you've described. According to our tribe's records, this is a place occupied by the Grim Reaper. Even the strongest Hu Yang would not be able to survive here. The strongest warrior in the tribe would immediately become weak and sickly after staying here for a day. Every July, there would be a black sandstorm here, but it would not spread. It would only stop in this area. Fang Qi Shao asked, do you feel anything? Chu Xiu shook his head. I don't know. I need to try. This primordial demon cave is dead. It doesn't belong to the mortal world. It should be in a sealed state now, so there won't be any leakage of power. As soon as he finished speaking, the third eye on Chu Xiu's forehead opened. Pure extreme Yin demonic qi burst out, tearing the ground in front of him. In an instant, something seemed to be triggered. The entire ground started to churn. Demonic qi shot up into the sky, crossing the sky. In an instant, the entire sky turned pitch black. A door that looked like a spatial rift appeared in the middle of the surging demonic qi. Chapter 1438. The commotion caused by Chu Xiu's move was a little big, even Fang Qi Shao was dumbfounded. These 3 eyes are more useful than 2 eyes. I say, Brother Chu, cultivating to your level, besides having 3 eyes, wouldn't you have a few more arms, a few more legs, or even a few more of that thing? Stop talking nonsense, hurry up and go in. This door is only temporary, it won't last for long. Fang Qi Shao's thoughts were always so strange, Chu Xiu didn't have time to accompany him to talk nonsense. The group entered the primitive devil cave through the door, and instantly felt the cold and gloomy demonic qi. Of course, only Fang Qi Shao wasn't used to it. Chu Xiu and the others all cultivated demonic techniques, so they didn't feel anything wrong at this moment. Previously, Chu Xiu had been to the primitive devil cave in the lower mortal heaven. Compared to the lower mortal heaven, the primitive devil cave in the higher mortal heaven only gave Chu Xiu a feeling of deathly stillness. Although the place where the primitive devil cave was located should be deathly stillness, the demonic qi was originally formed from the power of extreme yin. But facing death to live, even in an extremely deathly stillness, there would still be some dangerous ghosts and other things born. For example, the human skull tree that Chu Xiu encountered in the lower mortal heaven, as well as the heart demon, etc. They could be considered as existences nurtured by the primitive devil cave. However, there was nothing here. There were only craggy rocks, dull silence, and endless darkness. There was not even a hint of danger. Fang Qishao curled his lips. I thought that this place would be the same as the primitive devil cave in the lower realm. Who would have thought that this place would be like this? It wasn't easy to get something peacefully, don't jinx it. Previously, Unparalleled Heavenly Demon had already said that there could only be one primordial devil cave in a world. Since high mortal heaven was destroyed, this primordial devil cave would naturally fall into a deep slumber. Therefore, it wasn't strange for it to look like this. According to Supreme Heavenly Demon, everything else had dissipated. Therefore, the only danger in this primitive devil cave was the demonic Dao martial artists who had fallen here in ancient times or even earlier. After they perished here, their souls, under the influence of the primitive demon cave and the dual effects of the demonic path source, had turned into demon puppets to guard this place. Therefore, Chu Xiu directly led the group all the way through the air, advancing in a certain direction. There was no spatial direction in the primitive demon cave. In any case, as long as one went in one direction, they would eventually reach the end. With everyone's speed, it took them more than half a day to finally see the place at the end. It looked like a natural stone pagoda. The gigantic black pagoda shone with a glazed luster and was over 1,000 feet tall. At the very top of the pagoda, there was a faint demonic aura lingering around it. But at this moment, Chu Xiu could feel that it was the demonic path source. Because the moment he saw this thing, the yin and yang source in Chu Xiu's body trembled slightly. However, at this moment, a powerful tremor suddenly came from the front of the stone tower. The ground was torn apart, and demonic aura soared into the sky. Figures wrapped in demonic aura crawled out of the ground. From the style of these people's clothes, one could tell how many eras they were from. How long has it been? I don't know. Maybe a year, maybe 10,000 years. Someone wants to take away the source again? Maybe taking it away will be a release for us. These voices were extremely noisy. It seemed like they were made by a single person, but it also seemed like everyone was making them at the same time. These demon puppets should have lost their consciousness and yuan spirits. Now, they only had some remnant obsessions left. When Chu Xiu took a step forward, all the demonic puppets immediately turned their gazes towards Chu Xiu. A towering demonic aura pressed down on Chu Xiu. If you want the source, you have to answer a question. If you can't even get past us, what right do you have to touch the source? Oh? What question? Countless obsessions sounded in an instant. Even the yuan spirits of Mei Qinglian and the others were in pain. What, it's a demon. Chu Xiu, who bore the brunt of the attack, instantly felt the demonic voices piercing his ears. It was as if there were countless voices beside his ears, asking the same question in his heart. What is a demon? The corner of Chu Xiu's mouth twitched into a smile. Soul interrogation. Some people cultivated Dao for their entire lives, but they didn't know what Dao was. Some people practiced Zen for their entire lives, but they only thought that they worshipped Buddha. Then what is a demon? A name, a power, or a spirit? Then why did they call it a demon and not something else? Perhaps every demon path martial artist standing here had answered this question. The demon puppets present had also answered this question in the past, but they answered incorrectly, so they became demon puppets now. The supreme heavenly demon should have also answered incorrectly. But at that time, he was already a powerhouse of the ninth heavens, so he chose to forcefully defeat these demon puppets. But he couldn't take away the demon source. But now, for Chu Xiu, the sect master of the demon path, what is a demon? Raising his head, Chu Xiu looked ahead and said lightly, I stand here, and I am a demon. As his voice fell, the demon source within Chu Xiu's body throbbed. In an instant, the soaring demon flames filled the entire primitive demon cave, causing a different kind of power to appear in this deathly silent primitive demon cave. Chu Xiu also didn't know what a demon was. He only knew that when you stood at the peak, if you said you were a demon, then you were a demon. If you said you wanted to become a god, then you were the only god in this world. If you put on a kasaya and sat on a lotus throne, then you would become a Buddha. Tao, Buddha, and demon didn't matter what they were, but what you wanted to become. Chu Xiu didn't know whether this answer was correct or not. In any case, he believed that he was right. The power of the demon source spread throughout the primitive demon cave, and at the same time, it also stimulated the demon source above the tower. Below, the demon puppets exuding powerful demon chi were also stimulated. All the demon puppets knelt on the ground, as if they were paying homage to their demon lord. At the same time, their power began to flow into Chu Xiu's body on their own initiative. At this moment, Chu Xiu was completely shrouded in demon chi, and demon flames filled the skies. Fang Qishao stared at all of this, dumbfounded. He murmured, is this the legendary child of destiny? Once the tyrannical aura of a king comes out, all four sides kowtow. Say, if I go to the other sword sects and say that I am a sword, will they recognize me as their master and make me the #1 sword master under the heavens? Mei Qinglian glanced at him and said lightly, they will think that you are very cheap. They will think that your existence is simply a humiliation to the sword cultivator lineage. Then, they will beat you up and nail you to the ground in front of their sect. I don't seem to attract so much hatred, right? Fang Qishao shrank his neck. Wei Shuya shook his head and said, these demon puppets are not choosing a master now. Instead, they are choosing an existence that can perfectly match their demon source. Most of the demon Dao martial artists actually don't know what a true demon is. Cultivating demon Dao cultivation methods is a demon? Opposing the righteous path is a demon? Or is it like that supreme heavenly demon who conducted all kinds of forbidden experiments to create an indestructible primordial spirit, but everyone still calls him a demon? Such a superficial understanding won't gain the approval of these demon puppets. It's even more impossible to subdue them with pure arrogance. Fang Qishao was surprised and said, Elder Wei, since you have such a thorough understanding of the demon Dao, will it have the same effect if you go up there? Wei Shuya smiled bitterly and said, of course not. Understanding is one part of it, and strength is another. Only someone with Chu Xiu's cultivation and powerful physical strength can withstand the power of these demon puppets entering one's body. If it were me, I reckon my body would be completely torn apart after a few blows. If you want to obtain the power of the 10,000 demon kowtow, you must first have the strength to withstand it. Fang Qishao nodded in understanding. However, he was wondering if there was such a place in his sword lineage. At this moment, Fang Qishao's expression suddenly changed. He shouted, watch out! Save Brother Chu! Among everyone present, only Fang Qishao wasn't a martial immortal. However, after going through many experiences in the Daoyu Ocean, he had reached the half-step martial immortal realm. He cultivated the karma sword Dao, so his perception was extremely sharp. It couldn't even be considered perception. It was a feeling of a sudden impulse. As soon as Fang Qishao's voice fell, everyone moved. Although 7th young Master Fang was usually a little unreliable, no one dared to ignore his serious and anxious tone at this moment. He was the fastest. He didn't move. Instead, he formed hand seals on the spot. Suddenly, a blood-red shadow floated out. It drained half of his blood qi and appeared behind Chu Xiu. At the same time, in the pitch-black primitive devil cave, the original god's figure strangely appeared. As if he had been lying in ambush, his four arms formed fist seals and smashed towards Chu Xiu. Under the fist seals, Jianghu's blood-red shadow exploded and turned into a bloody mist. However, he had successfully blocked the attack. At this moment, Mei Qinglian's red lotus karmic fire, Wei Shiya's great heavenly demon palm, and Lu Fengxian's peerless halberd all came crashing down. Among them, Wei Shiya was the first to become a martial immortal. With the help of the dragon vein's power, he had passed the stage of stabilizing his cultivation and entered the fourth heaven. Lv Fengxian's talent was amazing and she had a deep foundation. During this period of time, she had also stepped into the third firmament. Only Mei Qinglian was slightly weaker. She had just become a martial immortal not long ago and hadn't had the time to stabilize her cultivation. She was only at the first sky. However, the strange effect of the red lotus karmic fire could still affect her original spirit. Seeing that his sneak attack had failed and the others' attacks were approaching, the original god's figure flashed and he immediately fled. At this time, Monk Long Tu, Renaga, and Mu Baishuang appeared. Monk Long Tu said with pity, "That kid who cultivates the karma sword path is too sensitive. Otherwise, with the original god's non-elemental body, he could completely fuse with the primitive devil cave. This sneak attack could definitely injure Chu Xiu. It's a pity that it's too late." Renaga stared at the demon path origin and said, "It's not too late. As long as the demon path origin hasn't been taken by Chu Xiu, it's not too late." Chapter 1439. Chu Xiu wasn't surprised that someone was ambushing him in the primitive demon cave. With Chu Xiu's current strength and status, there would definitely be people watching him at all times. Perhaps when he sent Sikong Tan and Wind Sweeping Tower to investigate the source energy of the demonic path, there might already be people watching him. But what surprised Chu Xiu was that this group of people had actually come in groups. Looking around, Chu Xiu immediately guessed that the one who was secretly colluding with them should be Monk Long Tuesday. Chu Xiu stared at Monk Long Tu and sneered, "You can do it twice, but not thrice. You managed to escape the first 2 times, but this time, you won't be so lucky. Those who have died once should cherish the chance to live even more, but you seem to be impatient to die again." Monk Long Tu said indifferently, "Chu Xiu, you can only speak ruthlessly at a time like this. This time, it's not me who can't escape, it's you. This is the primitive demon cave. It's impossible for you to release that Daoist. There are 2 existences comparable to the 8th heavenly layer here. How are you going to fight them? How are you going to fight them?" Mu Baishuang also silently pulled out a sword, a broken sword. The broken sword was covered in rust, and it was hard to tell whether it was rust or dried blood. When the seemingly ordinary broken sword was pulled out, a sharp sword aura encircled the entire land. The dazzling light even lit up the pitch-black primitive demon cave. This was the broken sword that Mu Baishuang had followed Monk Long Tu to retrieve, the broken sword from the 10,000 sword desolate domain. The sword aura on it had been nurtured for tens of thousands of years, and its power had condensed to a terrifying level. Apart from Mu Baishuang, who had cultivated the absolute sword principle to the 7th heavenly layer, ordinary people simply couldn't control a weapon of this level. Chu Xiu revealed a cold smile, "But you also seem to have forgotten something. I am the leader of the demon sect, and this is the primitive demon cave. This place is supposed to be my home ground. Do you really think that I, Chu Xiu, can only rely on threats as a trump card?" As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, the power of the demonic puppets poured into Chu Xiu's body. By now, a thick cloud of demonic energy had already enveloped Chu Xiu. Even his eyes had been dyed pitch black. Amidst the surging demonic energy, the imposing aura actually made Renaja feel a sense of oppression. Renaja asked Monk Longtu, "Was this also within your expectations?" Monk Longtu shook his head. "This primitive devil cave has been sealed for tens of thousands of years. Apart from the source of the demon path, who knows what else is inside? As the leader of the demon sect, it is normal for Chu Xiu to obtain some opportunities here. It isn't a big problem, so don't worry about it." Just as Monk Longtu finished speaking, Chu Xiu let out a roar. In that instant, all the demonic shadows that surged into his body were released. They covered the sky and ground as they kowtowed in front of them. Boundless dark clouds of demonic aura tore through the void of rules, as though it had turned into a world of its own, enveloping the few of them. 10,000 demon worship. This was a sacred art, but it could also be said not to be a sacred art. It was the power of the demon path experts that had been accumulated for countless years in primitive devil cave. Now that it had surged into Chu Xiu's body, although the power hadn't been refined by Chu Xiu, the will of the demonic puppets, or rather their lingering thoughts, had evolved into this 10,000 demon worship. Since ancient times, apart from the supreme demon lord, who could withstand the worship of so many demon path experts? Monk Longtu and the original god couldn't, Mu Baishuang couldn't, and even Renaja couldn't. "Is this what you meant by not a big problem?" Renaga roared angrily. He formed a seal with his hands, and the Brahma Dharma idol appeared behind him. A golden lotus appeared on each arm, blooming brilliantly. It formed a golden lotus formation around Renaga, enveloping him within. Monk Longtu flashed and hid behind Renaja. At the same time, he chanted Buddhist chants. Golden Buddhist light covered him, turning him into unmovable Buddha. Mu Baishuang wasn't good at defense, but the swordwill on the broken sword in his hand was shocking. He slashed forward, using absolute strength to resist the power of the 10,000 demon worship. Only the original god was in the most miserable state. He didn't have any defensive techniques, nor did he have any external help. Fortunately, his physical body was strong enough to resist even Chu Xiu's lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Therefore, he could only use his own body to resist this power. After a few breaths, when the powerful demonic energy in Chu Xiu's body was completely released, the few of them were in a sorry state. Renaja's face was pale. The golden lotus around him had already shattered. Although Monk Longtu hid behind him, he was suppressed by the powerful demonic energy. Cracks appeared all over his body. Mu Baishuang and the original god, who was purely using his physical body to defend, also spat out blood. "You all can take it. Since you're here today, none of you can think of leaving." Chu Xiu's eyes flashed with a cold murderous intent. The power of the 10,000 demon worship attack just now was indeed shocking. Even if Chu Xiu used the world millstone and the furnace of good fortune, he wouldn't be able to reach this level of power. However, the price of this power was that the power in the demon puppets had been mostly used up. Although the remnant willpower and intent in the demon puppets had allowed Chu Xiu to control the 10,000 demon worship, if this power hadn't been used up, Chu Xiu could have slowly cultivated and digested this power in the primitive demon cave. He could have even used this power to reach the peak of the 7th heavenly layer and then used the origin power to reach the 8th heavenly layer. But now, everything had been destroyed by these fellows. How could Chu Xiu not be furious? Just as Chu Xiu had said, the primitive demon cave was his home ground. So what if there were two existences comparable to the 8th heavenly layer? Did they really think that Chu Xiu could only rely on the sealed heavenly souls in the Daoist to scare others? As Chu Xiu spoke, demonic figures circled around Chu Xiu's body. As Chu Xiu punched out, the entire primitive demon cave was filled with the deafening roars of the heavenly demons. When he saw this, Renaga simply wanted to curse. He had believed Monk Longtu's words and surrounded Chu Xiu to kill him. He had said that everything was within his control, but the result was completely different from what they had planned. Just now, when he was attacked by the power of the 10,000 demon worship, Renaga had used up a lot of his energy. However, at this moment, he was the only one who could withstand it. 7 colored rays of light appeared around Renaga's body. They contained different rules of power that could transform all power into pure vitality. Chu Xiu's fist met the incoming attack, but his figure immediately swelled up. He used the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, imbued with powerful demonic power. With a loud bang, he sent Renaga flying. Renaga's expression suddenly changed. Only now did he realize that Chu Xiu had actually stepped into the 7th heaven realm without him knowing. There were 9 heavenly layers of martial immortals. In reality, most cultivators thought the same as Chu Xiu. Although there were 9 heavenly layers, they were divided into 3 stages. Once one reached the 7th heavenly layer, one would be considered a late martial immortal. Their power would multiply. Previously, Chu Xiu's physical strength was already extremely shocking. Now that he had reached the 7th heavenly layer, even Renaga's pure strength was inferior to Chu Xiu's. At this moment, the original god and Mu Baishuang had already attacked. Regardless of whether it was right or wrong to surround and kill Chu Xiu, they had already attacked. If they didn't finish off Chu Xiu, they would all die here. Monk Longtu also wanted to attack. At this moment, Lu Jianghe and the others surrounded him with sinister smiles. Although they didn't even have a single 5th heavenly layer cultivator, they were still confident that they could finish off Monk Longtu if they joined forces. The tide of the battle had turned in an instant. Their original plan was to surround and kill Chu Xiu here. Since when did they end up being surrounded and killed by Chu Xiu? Under the huge heavenly law embodiment of heaven and earth, Chu Xiu's body was like an ancient demonic god. A huge palm swung down. With a loud bang, the original god was pressed into the ground. At the same time, a shocking sword aura flashed and slashed down. It was the simplest and purest sword aura, but it was so sharp that even Chu Xiu's heavenly law embodiment of heaven and earth couldn't withstand it. Chu Xiu's arm was torn off. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. He broke through the formation and slashed out with the power to swallow the sky. The 7 limits was a demonic blade, and in the environment of the primitive devil cave, its power increased by 30%. What appeared in front of Mu Baishuang was no longer a black hole. Instead, it was a demon domain that completely enveloped him. At this moment, a Buddhist chant descended. Renaga formed a hand seal, and the 2-faced, 4-armed Dharma embodiment behind him gradually became a 4-faced Dharma embodiment. The 4 faces represented the entire world. An invisible glass light barrier completely trapped Chu Xiu within, isolating him from all the nomological powers outside. At the same time, the 4-sided reincarnation wheel rotated, emitting rays of light that shot towards Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu looked up. The 3rd eye on his forehead bloomed. The power of yin and yang condensed into a pillar of light that seemed to pierce through the void, shattering all the light. Looking at the glass light barrier around him, Chu Xiu said indifferently, isolating the nomological powers? This is the primitive devil cave. Even the power you attract contains a trace of demonic qi. You can isolate the nomological powers, but what will you use to isolate the demonic qi? As Chu Xiu's voice fell, countless demonic shadows appeared around him. But this time, it wasn't a myriad of demons worshipping him. Instead, they condensed into a huge, blurry demonic shadow that drew on the power of the entire primitive devil cave. It was like the legendary primordial heavenly demon, the sovereign of all demons. It crushed everything in the world, leaving only endless demonic qi around it. Endless demonic pressure surged forth. It was like Renaga was fighting against the entire primitive devil cave. His Brahma Dharma idol instantly shattered, and he coughed up a mouthful of golden blood. His face was deathly pale. Chapter 1440. Renaga was so angry that he wanted to kill someone. However, he didn't want to kill Chu Xiu. Instead, he wanted to strangle Monk Lanta to death. This guy had a well-thought-out plan. He'd explained everything clearly and logically, but he'd neglected the most important point, Chu Xiu's strength. Renaga had seen Chu Xiu fight Yama with his own eyes. At that time, Chu Xiu was only at the 5th heavenly layer, but when he faced Yama, he was only at a disadvantage in terms of strength. With his great strength, he could even exchange a few blows with Yama without being defeated. Now that Chu Xiu had reached the 7th level, not only had he made up for his only weakness, but he'd even managed to suppress him in terms of strength. How was he supposed to fight this? Even if the three of them joined forces, they still wouldn't be able to defeat Chu Xiu. The original god charged forward again, but Chu Xiu slapped him to the ground again. Although the original god was considered a perfect creature, even a perfect creature had to cultivate. He could cultivate to perfection, but that didn't mean he was perfect from the moment he was created. Hence, although the original god was considered very strong by other warriors, he was only able to take a few hits at most to Chu Xiu. He basically posed no threat to him. Mu Baishuang had the broken sword from the sword despair domain, and a single slash from his sword had the power of a cultivator at the 8th level. However, the problem was that even a genuine 8th level martial immortal like Renaga couldn't defeat Chu Xiu. The threat he posed to Chu Xiu was extremely limited. If you want to defeat Chu Xiu, then stop him and buy me time. I only need 10 breaths of time. Don't tell me you two can't even last 10 breaths of time. As Renaga's voice fell, his entire body shone with a dazzling, glass-like brilliance. A pure, holy, glazed golden lotus rose from beneath his feet. Renaga sat cross-legged atop it, his four-faced, four-armed Dharma merging with his body. At this moment, he seemed like the reincarnation of the great god Brahma. The original god scanned here and there. His way of thinking was always simple. Besides taking a gamble, he didn't have any better solution. Thus, the original god's 4 arms behind his back made fist seals. The powers of the azure dragon, vermilion bird, white tiger, and black tortoise created seals, merging with his body. The endless power of the rules proactively flooded the original god. He didn't even need to urge them. At the same time, Mu Baishuang was much more decisive. He directly unleashed all the power of his qi and blood. The scarlet blood combined with the sharpness of the sword qi and actually repaired the broken half of the broken sword. As his sword slashed down, boundless sword energy tore through the void, as if it wanted to split the entire primitive devil cave in two. When he saw this, Monk Long too laughed maniacally, ha ha ha. No matter how many tricks Chu Xiu had up his sleeves, he still wouldn't be able to salvage the situation. When the Lord descends, I will be able to solve everything. I will be the #1 hero under the Lord. Just as he finished laughing maniacally, LV Fengxian's blood and qi suddenly erupted, and a powerful scorching energy fused into his unparalleled heavenly halberd. The simplest laws of strength shook the void, and as he let out a low bellow, his voice actually caused the entire void to explode. Brother Chu won't lose, we won't lose either. Halberd smashed down. The power was so strong that it instantly caused the surrounding space to tremble crazily. Even the surrounding demon energy in the primitive devil cave surged into Lu Fengxian's body. Even if Marquis Lu Wenho came back to life, he wouldn't be able to use Lu Fengxian's charm. Perhaps Marquis Lu Wenho was stronger, but the charm of this halberd belonged to Lu Fengxian. There was a loud explosion. Monk Long too was directly sent flying by this halberd. The Buddhist light around him shattered and his entire arm turned to dust. His body was also full of cracks. Lu Jianghu chuckled coldly and said, "Fengxian brat, show mercy. Our sect leader said to keep these guys alive. Monk Long too, it's time for us to settle the debt from back then. Just you wait and see how I will deal with you." Monk Long too snorted coldly, "Lu Jianghe, a joke like you wants to capture me? Are you worthy? In the past, in the Kunlun devil cult, you were just a joke. You were born a pirate and had a lowly status. You even dare to compare yourself to the fifth demon venerable. You simply don't know your place. After being sealed for 500 years, you are still the same. I heard that you still admire the Red Lotus demon venerable. Huh, what a joke. The moment he said this, the smile on Lu Jianghe's face gradually disappeared. It became incomparably gloomy and terrifying. The atmosphere in the primitive devil cave was even colder. F***ck your mother. In the next moment, Lu Jianghe directly let out a furious roar. Countless blood and demonic qi revolved around his body, forming a huge black and red spiral spear. At a speed that Wei Shuya and the others couldn't react to, it directly pierced through the void, passing through layers of space, tearing apart all laws, and instantly pierced through Monk Long Tu's entire body. Looking at the wound on his chest that was surrounded by blood and demonic qi, Monk Long Tu raised his head and looked at Lu Jianghe in disbelief. It was as if he didn't want to admit that he would actually die in the hands of such a joke. Lu Jianghe's sudden attack was not inferior to Lu Fengxian's extremely powerful halberd strike. Moreover, it was extremely fast, directly tearing through space and time. It was even more terrifying. The way Mei Qinglian looked at Lu Jianghe changed a little. She decided not to laugh at Lu Jianghe in the future. Previously, in the entire Kunlun demon sect, although Lu Jianghe's seniority was very high, being the hall master of the Kunlun demon sect 500 years ago, his personality was something that no one could bring themselves to respect. Therefore, even Mei Qinglian would always make fun of him. However, Lu Jianghe's furious expression and extremely violent attack just now made them see a different Lu Jianghe. Lu Jianghe also had a bottom line. Usually, he was carefree and a little unruly. However, once someone touched his bottom line, he would suddenly explode. This was the real blood sea demon venerable. Just as everyone was silent, Lu Jianghe suddenly slapped his thigh. F***ck. Why did this guy die just like that? The sect master wants him alive. The merit is gone now. Everyone looked at Lu Jianghe, who gently shook his head. It was easy to change mountains and rivers, but hard to change a person's nature. At this moment, Mu Baishuang and the original god on Chu Xiu's side were using all of their strength. Their power was also shocking. That was why Monk Longtu was so confident. However, facing the two's attacks, the third eye on Chu Xiu's forehead emitted a dazzling divine light. Yin and yang powers intertwined. As Chu Xiu clasped his hands together, the sky and earth became clear and the earth became muddy. They were like a millstone, crushing each other. The entire sky and earth covered Mu Baishuang and the original god. The broken sword in Mu Baishuang's hand shone with an incomparably sharp light. Even if the sky and earth merged, it would still slash this part of the sky and earth. The two horns on the top of the original god's head represented the yin and yang powers. They protected his body and used all of their strength to resist the power of the yin-yang millstone. Within the entire primitive demon cave, rumbling sounds gradually spread out. And this time, the yin and yang forces were no longer balanced. Because they were in the primitive demon cave, the yin attribute power was clearly stronger than the yang attribute power. The two of them were directly crushed to the ground. However, before they could relax after this attack, Chu Xiu's hands seemed to be hugging each other. The scorching power was evolving. The yin and yang power fragments scattered in the space were all turned into chaotic power under this power. It trapped them and burned them constantly. Good fortune furnace. Yin and yang were separated, creating chaos. Under this power, Mu Baishuang could no longer resist. Instead, he released all the sword energy in his body to protect himself. The original god's 4 arms made hand seals at the same time. He even tore a cut on the 2 horns on his head. Black and white liquid flowed out, turning into the extreme yin and yang power to protect his body, counteracting the power of the good fortune furnace. How long do you want us to hold on for? Mu Baishuang shouted at Renajali. As Mu Baishuang's voice fell, Renajali was finally ready to attack. Or rather, he could finally attack. The golden lotus bloomed, a powerful force surging. Renajali's figure was in the center of the lotus petals. However, he was currently shrouded in golden light, like the legendary Brahma heaven. The vitality of good fortune illuminated the entire primitive demon cave. This power actually changed the origin demon chi in the primitive demon cave, opening up a pure land. After withdrawing the power of the good fortune furnace, Chu Xiu's third eye condensed all the origin demon chi. The entire primitive devil cave seemed to come alive at this moment. Countless demonic shadows roared as they flew over from all directions, rushing towards the pure land that Renaga had opened up. They wanted to extinguish the last bit of light in this devil cave. Just as everyone thought that Renajali's next attack would be earth-shattering, the golden lotus beneath him bloomed. It actually tore open a portal filled with spatial storms in the void. Golden glazed Buddhist light enveloped Renaga's body, and he actually dove into the spatial storm, disappearing without a trace. Chu Xiu was stunned. He immediately retracted his power and placed his hand on the hilt of the formation-breaking saber at his waist. However, he did not slash out in the end. It wasn't that he didn't want to attack, but that he couldn't catch up. No one had expected that Renajali, who had used all his strength, would actually open up a spatial crack in the primitive demon cave to escape. The golden glazed Buddhist light and the lotus around him probably weren't prepared for Chu Xiu. He probably wanted to escape into the spatial storm to protect himself. The distance was too far, and it was unknown whether the clear sky illuminating shadow could affect anyone who fell into the spatial storm. Chu Xiu didn't want to waste his energy. Hence, he turned his gaze to the origin god and Mu Baishuang. This made their scalps go numb. Chapter 1441. The original god and Mu Baishuang had been tricked by Monk Long Tu and Renaga. If Monk Long Tu had tricked them unintentionally, then Renaga had done it on purpose. Monk Long Tu's plan wasn't wrong. His mistake was that he underestimated Chu Xiu's sudden increase in strength. He also didn't expect that the power in primitive devil cave could actually make Chu Xiu strong to such an extent. As for Renaga, after Monk Long Tu died, he wasn't prepared to fight Chu Xiu head-on. This was primitive devil cave, and Chu Xiu was the devil sect master. This was Chu Xiu's home field. His power could be replenished in time here, but he had to expend even more power to suppress the powerful devil chi here. Moreover, Chu Xiu was already at the 7th level of the heaven. Chu Xiu's power was even stronger than his own at the 8th level. If this continued, he would definitely be the one to die. That was why he had used Mu Baishuang and the original god to stop him and tear a spatial crack to escape. Primitive Devil Cave was a world of its own, but it wasn't a great world like the upper and lower realms. Even if he fell into a spatial storm, he could survive with his power. Chu Xiu turned his gaze to the original god, his eyes flashing with a cold light. Without waiting for the original god to speak, Shi Yan immediately performed the hand seal. 6 Saha splendor wheels emerged, covering the original god who was wounded badly. At the same time, the 6 Paths reincarnation bracelet in Chu Xiu's hand spun frantically, pulling the original god's mind power. Chu Xiu took a step forward and arrived in front of the original god. He placed one hand on the original god's head. His power exploded and instantly destroyed the original god's primordial spirit. Chu Xiu put the original god's perfect body back into his secret storage box. He wasn't interested in corpses, but the original god's corpse was very useful to Chu Xiu. It could even be said that the original god's corpse itself was a treasure. It had been created with all the resources of the original god palace. Chu Xiu turned to look at Mu Baishuang, his eyes filled with killing intent. The World Sword Sect and Chu Xiu mainly had a conflict of ideologies. Both parties actually did not have any personal grudges. But at that time, one side represented the eastern region, while the other represented the southern region. Sooner or later, there would be a battle. Ever since he descended to the lower realm, the sword sects of the world did not come looking for trouble with him. It could be considered as keeping a low profile. Chu Xiu was prepared to let this matter go. However, he didn't expect Mu Baishuang to dare to attack again. Since that was the case, he couldn't blame him for being ruthless. The incense could only be burned once, and the second time could be directly expiated. Mu Baishuang let out a long sigh. There was no fear in his eyes, only a hint of unwillingness. In the world of great battles, the sword sect of the world still did not have the luck to stand at the peak. No matter how they planned, they still failed in the end. The broken sword in his hand was still shining with sword chi that soared to the heavens. Just as he was about to pick up the broken sword and fight with all his might, seventh young master Fang suddenly said, "Brother Chu, wait." Fang Qishao walked out and smiled bitterly at Chu Xiu. "Brother Chu, actually, I wanted to ask you to let the world sword sects go. But I also know that this matter is a little too much. So, if the world sword sects are willing to submit to the Kunlun devil cult, can you let them go?" Chu Xiu sighed and said, "Of course I will let them go. But do you think the world sword sects will admit defeat so easily? Even if the world sword sects don't submit, I can let Mu Baishuang go today. But no one can guarantee that the world sword sects won't continue to be enemies with me. Most of the sword cultivators are very stubborn. A sword cultivator would rather break than bend. Although they are stubborn, they are not flexible. You know this." Based on the relationship between Fang Qishao and Chu Xiu, since he had spoken, it would not be a problem for Chu Xiu to let Mu Baishuang go. If it wasn't for Fang Qishao's timely reminder, although Chu Xiu could have withstood the sneak attack of the original god, he was suffering from the worship of 10,000 demons and was absorbing the power of the demon puppets. He would have been injured. Moreover, since Fang Qishao was involved with the world sword sects, it was Chu Xiu's fault. He was the one who sent Fang Qishao to the world sword sects. But just as he had said, he could let the world sword sects go a second time, but he could not let them go a third time. With the stubborn character of the world sword sects, they would definitely not choose to submit. As expected, Mu Baishuang shook his head expressionlessly and said, "Fang Qishao, although you joined the world sword sects as a spy, we all have our own masters. I don't hate you. The world sword sects were careless. Since it has been done, there is no room for regret. The world sword sects will not submit just like that. The sword may be broken, but the dignity of a sword cultivator remains." Fang Qishao suddenly asked, "What is a sword?" Mu Baishuang wanted to say it out of instinct, but the words were stuck in his throat. What was a sword? After so many years, his sword cultivation had reached the peak and he had ascended to the martial immortal realm. But he did not seem to have thought about what a sword was. Fang Qishao sighed and said, "They say that a sword cultivator would rather break than bend. In reality, why must he be so stubborn? Is the inheritance of the sect more important or the dignity of a sword cultivator? Sect leader, a sword is a sword, a weapon. Why must you give it so many meanings? What is the meaning of the existence of the world sword sects? Encompassing the sword principles of the world and passing down the lineage of the sword is the true meaning of the world sword sects. It is not the so-called dignity of a sword cultivator. There is a sword only when there are people. Without people, the sword is just a dead object. It is a weapon." As Fang Qishao spoke, he suddenly extended his hand and grabbed the broken sword in Mu Baishuang's hand. There was a tremor on the broken sword. In the end, all the sword aura disappeared and Fang Qishao held it in his hand. Mu Baishuang widened his eyes in disbelief. The broken sword came from the Thousand Swords' unique domain, and it was filled with extremely powerful sword aura. Monk Longtu did not even dare to move. He could only suppress it by relying on his sword aura cultivation of the seventh heaven. Yet, at that moment, the seventh young master Fang, a cultivator who had yet to reach the martial immortal realm, was actually so easily captured by him. In fact, he seemed to be even more relaxed than Chu Feng. There was no backlash at all. Fang Qishao picked up the broken sword in his hand and weighed it. He said, "For so many years, the world's sword sects have always acted like swords. Even if they knew that it was a dead end, they would still move forward. In fact, as long as they took a slight turn, they would see a different scenery. For example, the sword aura of this sword. Sect leader, you used your own power to suppress the sword aura from the beginning and forcibly controlled it. But why didn't you think of using your own power to guide the sword aura and let it naturally be used by you? I can do it, and so can you, sect leader." After the world sword sects descended to the lower world, they have never cooperated with the sects in the lower world. Now that I am the sect leader of Sword King City, I am willing to join forces with the world sword sects to recruit sword cultivators from the lower world and establish the World Sword Alliance. At the same time, I will form an alliance with the Kunlun Devil cult. Just like High Heaven Sect and Imperial Sky Pavilion in the upper world, we will follow the lead of the Kunlun Devil cult. This is all I can do. The future of the world's sword sects depends on sect leaders' decision. The expression on Fang Qishao's face was rare at this time. Mei Qinglian looked left and right and suddenly found that everyone seemed to be hiding another side. Of course, for Fang Qishao, this might be growth. The world sword sects did not have any enmity with Sword King City as long as they did not care about the fact that Fang Qishao had been a spy. The two of them joined forces to establish the World Sword Alliance. It could be said that it was a gathering of the strongest Sword Dao sects in the upper and lower worlds and could also absorb many Sword Dao rogue cultivators. At the same time, they surrendered to the Kunlun Devil cult as the World Sword Alliance. Not only did they give Chu Xiu an explanation, but they also gave the World Sword sects a way out. After all, it was not the Kunlun Devil cult that the World Sword sect surrendered to, but the Kunlun Devil cult that the World Sword Alliance surrendered to. Although it was actually the same meaning, it could also make the stubborn swordsmen of the World Sword sects feel less embarrassed. Even Chu Xiu had to admit that Fang Qishao's actions could be said to be a win-win situation for all three parties. With the Kunlun Devil cult's explanation, the World Sword sects had a way out. The Sword King City merged with the World Sword sects. Although the Sword King City was weak now and did not have much say, with Fang Qishao's growth in the future, who else would be the alliance master of the World Sword Alliance but him? Therefore, after this series of actions, in fact, all three parties did not suffer any losses. Mu Baishuang smiled bitterly and nodded. From now on, you are the alliance master of the World Sword Alliance. This sword will also be under your control. Fang Qishao handed the broken sword back to Mu Baishuang and shook his head. This sword is not bad. The position of alliance master is more prestigious than the sect master. However, strength is still important in the pugilistic world. I am not even a martial immortal, so wouldn't I be a laughing stock if I became the alliance master? Therefore, this sword should still be controlled by the sect master. No, it should be controlled by the alliance master. Mu Baishuang did not decline. He took the broken sword and nodded. He then awkwardly bowed to Chu Xiu and said, "Cult Master Chu, please forgive me if I have offended you. If it was someone thick-skinned and black-hearted, even if they were fighting to the death just now, they would still be able to change factions easily, just like Xikong Tan." However, Mu Baishuang was, after all, a Sword Dao martial immortal. He was straightforward and very overbearing. It was already very rare for him to be able to do this. Chu Xiu nodded and did not mind. He was not a pompous person. He would only feel comfortable hearing people call him the sect master and unify the pugilistic world. Although it felt good to be flattered, it was a pleasant surprise to be able to subdue the World Sword sect for his own use. Although the World Sword sect had been crippled during the attack on the East region, their overall strength was still there. The overall strength of the disciples in the sect was very extraordinary. If used well, they would be of great help. After the matter was settled, Chu Xiu also looked at the origin of diabolism on the high tower. The previous series of battles did not cause the origin of diabolism to fluctuate at all. It was still standing on the high tower. This time, there should be no one to disturb him, right? Chapter 1442. Compared to the first time he obtained the origin, Chu Xiu was much more familiar with the process this time. Standing on top of the tower, Chu Xiu's third eye blossomed, guiding the yin and yang origin power within his body to envelop the devil path origin. In an instant, the devil path origin bloomed with a pitch-black light and actively integrated into Chu Xiu's body. Origin power could attract each other. Since Chu Xiu had an origin in his body, it was much easier for him to absorb other origins. This seemingly inconspicuous strand of demonic qi surged into Chu Xiu's body, but it gave him an even greater power than when the demonic qi from the worship of 10,000 demons had entered his body. Furthermore, it had erupted in an instant. At this moment, Chu Xiu's entire body was shrouded in layers of black devil qi. A powerful force surged within Chu Xiu's body, even triggering the originally quiet yin and yang origin. At this moment, it was also agitated and overflowing with power. The three origins were also overflowing with power, which was somewhat beyond Chu Xiu's imagination. He let out a wild roar and demonic aura soared into the sky, causing the void space to tremble. Even Chu Xiu's body started to show signs of cracks. However, under the cracks on Chu Xiu's body, what gushed out was not blood, but thick strands of devil qi. At this moment, Chu Xiu could only use all his strength to forcibly suppress the restless power of the origins. At the same time, he tried his best to keep it in his body and improve his cultivation. Early 7th level, middle 7th level, peak 7th level. At the moment when his aura climbed to the peak, Chu Xiu still wanted to desperately integrate power into his body, but the restless power of the three origins made Chu Xiu unable to suppress it. With a roar, he directly punched out, releasing all the power in an instant. Wherever the fist passed, space was directly torn apart. It was like a long river, with no end in sight. The primitive devil cave was a small world of its own. It was the kind of small world that had its own source, so it was extremely tough. Previously, Renaga had used all his strength to tear open a spatial door, but now, the power of Chu Xiu's punch was 10 times, maybe even 100 times stronger. Chu Xiu let out a long breath. After the power of the third origin was released, it had finally taken root in his body. Unfortunately, he did not manage to step into the 8th heaven with the help of the origin energy. If Chu Xiu had continued to insist on being brave and forcefully swallowed that energy, he would have been seriously injured. Chu Xiu didn't know if he could step into the 8th heaven, but he would have to lie in bed for a long time. Landing on the ground, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "I have obtained the origin source. We can leave now. Sect Master Mu, the alliance between Sword King City and the Sword Sect can be carried out now. I'm afraid I'll need your help in the future." Mu Baishuang was slightly taken aback. He was still not used to Chu Xiu's orders. But no matter how unaccustomed he was, he had to accept his fate. Mu Baishuang asked, "What does Cult Master Chu intend to do with the Sword Sect, the World Sword Alliance?" Chu Xiu laughed coldly. "This time, the Sanskrit sect wanted to find trouble with me, causing me to be unable to step into the 8th heaven. How can I just let this matter go? There is still an origin source in the Sanskrit sect. They made me unable to step into the 8th heaven, so naturally, I have to demand this karma from them. Among the people who had come to besiege Chu Xiu, Monk Longtu and the original god were dead. Mu Baishuang had descended, so there was only the Sanskrit sect left. There was still an extreme Yang origin source in the Sanskrit sect. If he could obtain it and form another pair of yin-yang origin source, Chu Xiu would definitely be able to step into the eighth heaven. Although Renaga had escaped, he could run away, but he couldn't run away from the temple. Mu Baishuang sighed inwardly. At the same time, he felt lucky. With Chu Xiu's vengeful personality, if he didn't surrender now, the World Sword sect would probably not be able to protect itself in the future. Chu Xiu's way of doing things was really different from the Daoist forces and sections. Over the past 10,000 years, most of the Daoist sects had been passed down from ancient times. It wasn't because they were powerful, but because of a habit. Although the Daoist sects also schemed against each other and had all sorts of conflicts, it was rare for them to use all their strength to fight to the death. Even the Sanskrit sect and the heavenly Luo temple, which had a deep hatred for each other, wouldn't do that. Everyone controlled the conflicts within a very small area. This way, even if they lost, it would only be a small loss. Then, they would accumulate their strength and fight again the next time. Someone like Chu Xiu, who definitely didn't hold grudges overnight, would immediately fight to the death. It was almost impossible to find someone like him in the Daoist world. Even when Cold River City had risen, they wouldn't do this. After the group left Primitive Devil Cave, Sword King City prepared to form an alliance with the World Sword sect. This would take some time. At the same time, Chu Xiu wasn't prepared to act now. He first returned to the Southern Barbarian Branch Palace to cultivate in seclusion for a period of time. Chu Xiu's strength had skyrocketed from the early stage of the seventh heaven to the peak of the seventh heaven. Thus, he needed some time to familiarize and adapt to this power. At this time, in the Sanskrit sect, when Yama saw Renaga's pale face fleeing back to the Sanskrit sect, he couldn't help but be shocked. What happened? Didn't Monk Longtu say that you went to attack Chu Xiu? Even if Chu Xiu didn't die, how did you end up in such a sorry state? Although Yama and Renaga had some conflicts in the past and didn't really like each other, he was still convinced by Renaga's strength. If he didn't use his trump cards and erupted with the peak state of his youth, he definitely wouldn't be able to defeat Renaga. Moreover, even if he recovered to his peak state, with Renaga's tenacity, he would still be the one to be exhausted to death. Against Chu Xiu, whose strength was far inferior to his, and with so many people surrounding him, how could Renaga end up in such a sorry state? Renaga's expression darkened. Don't say any more. We miscalculated. Monk Longtu, that idiot. He only calculated our strength, but he didn't calculate Chu Xiu's strength. I don't know when, but Chu Xiu has already stepped into the seventh heaven, and his strength is even stronger than mine. Moreover, we all forgot that Chu Xiu is the Devil sect leader. Primitive Devil Cave is his home field. He can use all the devil puppets there, and the amount of devil chi he can mobilize is also much stronger than ours. As a result, we were all defeated by Chu Xiu alone. Monk Longtu is already dead, and the other two are likely unable to hold on either. I could only escape for now. I suffered some injuries in the Primitive Devil Cave, so I will be in closed-door training for the time being. Notify the disciples to go out less, and activate defensive formations to guard against Chu Xiu's attacks. Yama frowned. Aren't you making too much of a fuss over nothing? You also said that Chu Xiu only took advantage of the Primitive Devil Cave's geographical advantage, that's why your plan failed. Now that you've escaped, can Chu Xiu bring out the Primitive Devil Cave to attack our Sanskrit sect? Renaga shook his head and said, just do as I say. It's better to be safe than sorry. As an eighth heaven martial immortal, although Renaga lost to Chu Xiu, it was as Yama said, he didn't think he was inferior to Chu Xiu. He just happened to be unlucky to be in Chu Xiu's home field. However, Renaga had already investigated Chu Xiu. He was extremely ruthless and vengeful. This time, they ambushed him. There was no guarantee that Chu Xiu wouldn't take revenge. Renaga felt that the Sanskrit sect had 2 8th heaven martial immortals, 6 other martial immortals from the lower realms, and a grand formation from the Daoist, so they shouldn't be afraid of Chu Xiu. However, Chu Xiu's methods couldn't be judged by common sense. If Chu Xiu really attacked, the Sanskrit sect wouldn't be able to withstand such a huge blow. After all, there was still the heavenly treasure temple eyeing them covetously. A month later, Chu Xiu had more or less stabilized his power. It was time for him to think about how to deal with the Sanskrit sect. A gentleman's revenge was never too late. As long as there was an opportunity, Chu Xiu wouldn't even wait for 2 hours. In his primordial spirit, Chu Xiu used a secret technique to contact the inner demon who was bewitching the Sky Emperor Palace's palace master. Right after the connection was made, the inner demon's voice was heard. "Oh. It's been a long time since you last contacted me. I thought you'd forgotten about me." Compared to before, the inner demon seemed to be much livelier. Perhaps it was because he had been a human for a long time, but he was gradually becoming a real living being, a real human. "How could I forget about you before the Sanskrit sect is completely dealt with? What's your position in the Sanskrit sect now?" The inner demon said, "I'm still bewitching the Sky Emperor Palace's palace master. But Yanma trusts me very much. He even told me that when the Sanskrit sect master returns, the position of the Lord of Vishnu Palace will be mine. By the way, it seems like you're preparing to deal with the Sanskrit sect? What do you need me to do?" Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Don't make any strange moves for now. You only have one chance to make a move. When it's really critical, I'll inform you in advance." After cutting off the connection with the inner demon, Chu Xiu immediately summoned all the people under the Kunlun devil cult, except for those in the divine cloud realm and the imperial sky pavilion. Although these 2 sects had expressed their allegiance to Chu Xiu didn't want to use them. It wasn't because he was worried that these 2 sects would betray him, but because they were originally Daoist sections. If Chu Xiu was still the master of the East Territory, it wouldn't be a problem to use them. But now that Chu Xiu had the identity of a martial artist from the lower realm, it seemed a little awkward. Of course, it wouldn't be a problem to use the sword sect under the heavens. The Imperial Sky Pavilion and the High Heaven sect took the initiative to surrender to Chu Xiu. In return for a plum, Chu Xiu naturally had to take care of their thoughts. However, the sword sect under the heavens surrendered after being defeated by Chu Xiu. To put it bluntly, they had already surrendered. Why would they have so many thoughts and requests? You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.